Good evening. Welcome to the October 3rd edition of the Downers Grove Village Council meeting. We're glad you've joined us here this evening. As is our tradition, we'll begin tonight with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Mayor Barnett,
Here.
Commissioner Jose, Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Here.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Here.
Commissioner Glover,
Here.
Commissioner Tully,
Here.
Commissioner Davenport.
Here.
Good to see everybody tonight. Commissioner Jose will not plan to be with us at all this evening. Item 3 on our agenda tonight, we have several proclamations, 3 of them to be exact. First one is Fire Prevention Week. Whereas the National Fire Protection Association named the second week of October as Fire Prevention Week in commemoration of the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. Whereas, according to the National Archives and Record Administration's Library Information Center, Fire Prevention Week is the longest-running public health and safety observance on record. And the President of the United States has signed a proclamation declaring a national observance during the week every year since 1925. Whereas local fire departments responded to 1,353,500 fires in 2021. These fires caused 3,800 civilian deaths, 14,700 civilian injuries, and over $15 billion in property damage, according to the National Fire Protection Association. Whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department sponsors an annual fire prevention program. Whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department's primary concern and interest is the 24/7, 365 safety and protection of life and property in the village of Downers Grove. Whereas the Downers Grove Fire Department renders a vital public safety and prevention service in the village of Downers Grove through education, inspection, drills, and plan reviews, and responding to over 7,500 calls for service last year alone. Whereas the theme of the 2023 Fire Prevention Week is Cooking Safety Starts With You, that works to educate everyone about simple but important actions they can take to keep themselves and those around them safe when cooking. Whereas 2 of every home fires in the kitchen started, with 31% of those fires resulting from unattended cooking. Whereas the observance of Fire Prevention Week provides an excellent opportunity for individuals to make sure their smoke and carbon monoxide alarms meet the needs of all their family members, including those with sensory or physical disabilities, and to take personal steps to increase their safety from fire, especially in their homes. Now therefore I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of October 8th through 14th, 2023 to be Fire Prevention Week in the Village of Downers Grove, and encourage all residents to educate themselves on fire prevention, fire safety, family emergency escape planning, and to support the many public safety education activities and efforts of the Downers Grove Fire Department. Dated this 3rd day of October, 2023, Downers Grove, Illinois. We've got a crew from our fire department here to accept this proclamation.
Good evening, Mayor Barnett, council members, and residents of the Village of Downers Grove. Thank you very much for the Fire Prevention Week proclamation. As you mentioned, Mayor, this year's theme is Cooking Safety Starts With You. Year after year, cooking remains the leading cause of fires, by far, accounting for 49% of all house fires. These numbers tell us that there is still much to be done. As Fire Prevention Week approaches, the Downers Grove Fire Department reminds residents cooking safety starts with you. October 8th through the 14th, the Downers Grove Fire Department is teaming up with the National Fire Protection Agency, NFPA, the official sponsor of fire prevention for more than 100 years. To promote this year's Fire Prevention Week campaign, again, cooking safety starts with you. The campaign works to educate everyone about simple but important actions they can take when cooking to keep themselves and others around them safe. The Downers Grove Fire Department is hosting our Night at the Firehouse open house Wednesday, October 11th, starting at 6:30 p.m. at Downers Grove Station 5, located at 6701 Main Street in Downers Grove. The silent parade will also pass through Downers Grove on Friday, October 13th, leaving from Hinsdale and proceeding west on Maple Avenue at approximately 7 o'clock at night. Please also view the Village of Downers Grove social media pages for fire prevention safety messages all week long. Thank you and stay safe.
We have another proclamation this evening, National Code Compliance Month. Whereas code enforcement officers provide for the safety, health, and welfare of citizens living in communities throughout the United States through the enforcement of building, zoning, housing, environmental, property maintenance, and other code and ordinances. Whereas code enforcement officers are dedicated, well-trained, and highly responsible individuals who take their jobs seriously and are committed to promoting life safety and improving neighborhood aesthetics in the course of their daily jobs. Whereas building relationships and knowledge of the community is an integral part of a proactive and professional code enforcement approach. Whereas effective and professional code enforcement officers can have a major impact on the property values, the image of our community, the quality of life of its residents, as well as shaping the community's understanding of local government and their municipal experience. Whereas October is set aside to honor and recognize our code enforcement officers as an opportunity to highlight the contributions these individuals have made to the quality of our community. Whereas many valuable contributions are made by code enforcement officers throughout the country. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim October 2023 as National Code Compliance Month in the Village of Downers Grove, and extend thanks on behalf of our community for the commitment of our code enforcement officers to public service. Dated this third day of October, Downers Grove, 2023. Stan, come down. We have one more this evening. This has to do with the Historical Society's Montrose Dunham Award. Whereas Bruce Swanson is being presented with the Downers Grove Historical Society's Montrose Dunham Award for 2023, which was established in 2019 to honor those whose significant service and contributions to the Village of Downers Grove have earned them a place in its history. Whereas Bruce Swanson, a 59-year resident of Downers Grove, had a long and illustrious 30-year career as an elementary school teacher for Downers Grove School District 58. During his tenure at District 58, Bruce and his peers developed the Good Citizen Award, which was awarded to one student in each of the fifth grade classrooms, and also awarded the Helping Children Grow Award because Bruce and his fellow teachers felt that academic excellence should not be the only reason to honor students. Whereas Bruce Swanson has also exhibited his love for teaching and helping others by working at Camp Edwards for a record 50 years, teaching golf to men and women, raising funds for worthy causes, including cancer research, through golf tournaments such as the Pine Hollow Open. Whereas Bruce Swanson was an active member of the Jaycees, is a current member of the Grove Foundation in his local church, and is a longtime member of the Downers Grove Historical Society, where he is one of the major forces behind organizing and promoting Founders Day. Whereas Bruce Swanson has honored fellow citizens with name bricks at the library by assisting in the memorialization of Downers Grove MIA Vietnam War soldier Tim Bodden, and Bruce routinely goes above and beyond by providing scholarships for students and gifting those in need with inspiring poems and donations. Now therefore, I, Robert T. Barnett, Mayor of the Village of Downers Grove, do hereby proclaim the week of October 1st through 7th, 2023, as Bruce Swanson Week in the village of Downers Grove, and I encourage all members of our community to remember Bruce Swanson for his lifetime of service and accomplishments, including the Downers Grove Historical Society's 2023 Montreux Dunham Award, and to model Bruce's dedication to teaching, history, and acts of kindness. Dated this third day of October, 2023, Downers Grove, Illinois. I'll just add, if you don't know Bruce, you should. So a motion concerning minutes of previous council meetings.
Mayor, I move to approve the Village Council meeting minutes from September 19th, 2023 as presented.
Second.
Any comments or questions from the council on those minutes? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Those pass unanimously. Item 5 on our agenda is the public comments portion of our meeting. We have a few more people here than we normally have, and so if you'd help me just for a minute, I'd like to get some sense of meeting management a little bit later. If you're here to speak a little bit later on Main Street, please raise your hand. Okay? If you're here to speak a little bit later on the subject of video gaming, please raise your hand. Okay. We will be getting to those subjects in just a little bit. As a reminder, some of you have heard this before. For some of you, it's been a little while, but let's just take a minute to remind each other. At several points in this meeting, both now on general subjects and a little bit later on individual agenda items, there will be an opportunity for public comment. Public comment portion of our agendas are important and valued parts of each council meeting. We have provisions for these on every active agenda item, every first reading item, and in general in just a moment. Council sessions are not open debates. Please remember, those that follow our meetings will recognize this council allows extended commentary and input from the public and seldom, if ever, cuts anyone off. Beyond tonight's meeting, there are a variety of additional opportunities to engage council members, including our e-remarks system, the CRC system, coffee with the council, direct email, or by phone. Every one of your council members spends time in person, off dais, making themselves available to residents and businesses across the community. Those one-on-one conversations, frankly, are often the most valuable. Please remember your council is listening, taking notes, and considering what's said, and know that often some time is needed to reflect on the comments presented at one of our meetings. If you plan to speak, please keep in mind a few items when you come to the podium. Please state your name for the record. Address your comments to me as the chair of the meeting. Keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. Avoid repeating what others have already said. Please keep your comments to one visit to the podium per subject. And remember that the comments are most effective when they focus on subjects within the scope of Downers Grove Village governance. We are listening. We're not going to cut anybody off, but let's try and keep the meeting moving. So item 5 on our agenda tonight is public comments. This is the portion of the meeting where we entertain public comment on items not on tonight's agenda. So if you have some comments you'd like to give us that do not reflect an agenda item that's coming up yet, please come on down to the podium.
I just wanted to say how excited I am to hear everybody here to talk about Main Street. This is not to do about Main Street or video gambling or anything else per se, but I'm going to challenge you guys and communications and staff to try to come up with a way to help residents let you guys communicate this stuff to us. Because the more I talk to people about whether it's video gambling or bringing Main Street down to one lane or whatever, people just they claim that they don't understand it, they haven't heard about it. I think you guys are doing a good job. I do look at the website. A lot of people don't do it for the Main Street thing. The high school did send out an email. There's like a dozen people that showed up to that meeting a couple weeks ago. So the information's out there, but people, I guess the bottom line is to try to help people help themselves. There is a lot of information out there, and people get pissed off when all of a sudden they see a building coming out of the ground. Well, you should have been pissed off 10 years ago when that zoning was done for that building, not when it's coming out of the ground. A lot of people count on that kind of stuff. So I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but just try to figure out a way to do something different outside the box that you're not currently doing, because although I think you're doing it, for the large part of the community, they're not seeing stuff. Thank you.
Thank you. Other subjects not on tonight's agenda.
Hi, my name is Craig Uriel. I live at 3811 Candlewood Drive, what used to be Candlewood Court. My concern is the fence that 3800 Highland Avenue is trying to erect. They currently have a fence there that's been in place for, my neighbors tell me, up to 40 years. And that fence was originally put 10 foot inside of their property line. Now they want to tear that fence down and put a new fence up, and they want to put it up on the property line, which was 10 foot inside of where it's been for the last 40 years. Residents up and down the street have planted trees, bushes. We understand it's not our property, but we've also looked at it like they've abandoned that property when they erected that fence up. I haven't lived there for 40 years, but I'm getting this firsthand from my neighbor who has lived there for 40 years, and she can't be here to speak because she's very ill today. The concern is I've gotten some mixed communications from the village. I've talked to the permitting people, and I'm not sure if the permit's in or not in. They're telling me it was limited to 6 feet because it was zoned residential. I question that. I went to DuPage County. DuPage County says we don't handle that. We only do unincorporated. So I called York Township. We're in York Township. York Township says, no, that is commercial. They sent me a copy of the tax rolls that shows me that property is commercial. So based off the standards of the rules that you guys have, they're allowed to put up to an 8-foot high fence as opposed to a 6-foot. The other question is the color. Currently, there's a 40-year-old cedar fence that's there, which blends in with all the oak trees and everything that's there. Now they're going to put up a 6-foot tall almond colored. They're really nice to us. They're not putting a stark white. They're putting an almond color vinyl fence up. So I have sent a letter to Dr. Rambos, who's, I'm not sure if he owns that property or if he's representing them or what, because it's called the 3800 Highland Avenue Condominium Association. So I'm not sure how it's all handled. But I'm requesting everybody, if you want, come on out, look for yourself. The current fence is approximately a foot higher in the ground than the new fence will be because the topography of the land slopes down. And where the new fence is going to be, it's going to be at least a foot lower, which means all the parking lot traffic at night all those lights will be shining in everybody's houses. It's bad enough as it is with what's coming through from the fence. And of course, the constant up and down fire trucks, and nothing against the fire guys, and the ambulances, on Highland Avenue is just insane. But I understand that, and I'm not complaining about that. But if there's anything that you guys can do, talk to them, be reasonable. I've sent him a letter, being very polite, as polite as I can be, after working for 42 years as an executive for General Motors, getting my rear ends chewed out by executives and presidents and everybody else, and doing my fair share of chewing out too. But I was very polite and asked them to please consider the height and the color of the fence if we can't do anything about stopping that fence from going up. So I ask for whatever support you guys can do, help. I know it's sort of a political type thing as far as they're technically following the rules, but are they following the spirit of the law of being good neighbors, you know? So I thank you for your support, and please, my yard is open. You can come in anytime. The fence is there. The gates aren't locked. Go down to my neighbor's house. Her name is Nancy. She'd love to see anybody who comes down there. And she's going to get it worse than I am, because she's going to get the garbage trucks and stuff, because that's where the garbage roll-off is down there. And I'm not sure what time of the day they come. All I hear is they're beeping, but I don't really see the trucks. But she's going to see them all. And she spent a ton of money on landscaping because she's lived there for the 40 years. And all I can say is help. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioner, staff. I'm Rich Cullivaney, and I'm here representing the Downers Grove Historical Society as one of the directors. There are only 37 days left to History on Tap, and that's our historic pub crawl where people get to visit various watering holes within Downers Grove and learn about the history at the same time. We've expanded it. We have one additional site, so we include Ballydoyle, Cadence, Cellar Door, Gatto's, Pierce Tavern, Orange and Brew, and also Wasabi. And bringing back by popular demand our after party, which will be held at another round where pizza will be served. The event will start at 5 p.m. I should say. Wow, I guess we'll have to change it. At 5 p.m. running to 9 p.m. with the after party running for an hour after that. The tickets are $45 for non-members and $40 for members. So in order to get tickets, you just go to dghistory.org, O-R-G, not .com, dghistory.org, and they are already on sale. Those go pretty quickly, so we expect another full house. And on a totally different subject, not related to the Historical Society, I'm going to honor the mayor's request about another topic, but I do have to go to the events committee meeting. It's a big meeting before this event. I did want to speak very briefly in opposition to video gaming. You can find my reasons in my recent Facebook post and also on Nextdoor. I just don't think it's good for our village, and I understand that the commissioners are trying hard to mitigate some of the issues, but I think the signage and things like that, we've spent the last 30 years trying to clean up Ogden Avenue, and just to bring back that kind of element is not the image we're looking for. So, Mayor, excuse me for breaking the rules a little bit, but hopefully you'll understand. Thanks very much. Nice seeing you all again.
Thank you. Other subjects not on tonight's agenda? Okay, we will continue then. Item 6 on our agenda is the consent agenda. Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Mayor, I move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 6-0. That moves us to our active agenda. This is the portion of the meeting where we plan to take action on items previously discussed at least once, sometimes multiple times. Tonight's active agenda is consumed by our building code adjustments that we've been talking about on and off quite a bit. I think we'll be making a couple of motions, one kind of consolidating many of these, and then one that might get adjusted later. So is there a motion concerning the active agenda tonight?
Mayor, I move to adopt items A through I and K as presented.
Second.
Are there any comments from the audience on the building code amendments portion and the building code adoption portion? Any comments from the council? Rosa, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Sadowski-Fugit,
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Aye.
Commissioner Davenport,
Aye.
Commissioner Tully,
Aye.
Commissioner Glover,
Aye.
Mayor Barnett.
Aye. That passes 6-0. Is there a motion concerning the Illinois State Plumbing Code?
Mayor, I move to adopt an ordinance making amendments to the State of Illinois Plumbing Code as presented.
Second.
Any comments from the audience on this item? Any comments from the council on this item?
Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the ordinance to remove the local amendment prohibiting the use of cross-linked polyethylene, also known as PEX.
Second.
Any comments from the audience on this amendment? What's just been done here is we've moved initially to adopt the plumbing code update, and then there has been a motion to allow, essentially remove a previously contemplated prohibition on a certain type of plumbing. We've just made a motion to go ahead and allow that. So that's called PEK for anybody, or PEX, sorry, for anybody else that's watching and might have seen previous meetings. There's been some discussion about that. Any comments from the audience on PEX? Comments from the council?
I don't have any additional comments above and beyond what I've said before. So.
Okay. Martin?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I actually would benefit from those. As you may recall, I was unable to attend that meeting. I did watch the meeting, but I'm interested in hearing, and not to delay the meeting, I know we have a lot of people here to talk about a lot of things, but I could benefit from hearing the reasoning behind the motion for the amendment.
Sure. PEX material is, one, more affordable than copper. And so we start thinking about more affordable homes and housing in Downers Grove. It seems to be a little against that idea when we start eliminating good possibilities, for people to use for their plumbing. Second, just like copper, PEX material has several attributes. One, most, it's one of the highest, I would say, would be the higher burst strength that it has, so less concern with freezing. Better water pressure because you have fewer 90-degree turns. It also is, you're able to have, kind of think of it as like an electrical box in your home, a manifold, if you will, for all your plumbing fixtures. So makes it really easy to shut off plumbing at any plumbing fixture from one spot in the house. It had some issues back in the 90s, early 2000s with some brittleness, with some resistance to chlorine, things like that. That has all improved. 99% plus of the rest of the country is using PEX quite frequently. You get outside the Chicago area, you build a house, it's all going. There's not even a question about it. It's going to be PEX. It's proven to be safe. It's in the state plumbing code, and I just don't think the rationale for removing it holds up. I think this is an option that should be available to our residents.
And if I may, Mayor, the amendment that's on the table would simply add that as an option. It would not obligate anyone to use that material.
That's my understanding of the plumbing code. The amendment, what we were initially considering was a motion to adopt with a local amendment prohibiting, or removing that prohibition.
The amendment on the table would add an option to consumers they wouldn't otherwise have.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anyone else got? Leslie, please.
Yeah, I've been struggling with this one a little bit because I do like the possibility that there could be a more affordable option. But from what I am seeing, the available research now from environmental and water quality groups is there are still concerns about, the plastics and some other chemicals potentially leaking into the water supply. I know, for example, the National Resources Defense Council has a report on this about best practices, especially with regard to removing lead service lines, as we will be discussing, I'm sure, within the next 6 months or so, and kind of what best practices are for that. And it was recommended in that report, and it was a collaboration between several, but it is on their website, the NRDC, that you do stick with copper lines for kind of all of the same concerns that we have with a lot of plastics. Not to mention just the production of plastics can be a little bit damaging. So for those, I'm not quite comfortable moving forward with PEX at this time. I don't know if any of those processes will get a little bit more clear or if we'll get more data on it, but as of now, I'm not comfortable with the data that's out there. Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
Mayor.
Mike, sure.
Yeah, so if I might speak to some of that. First of all, the water that arrives in your home is not arriving through copper pipes in the street. And so, introducing, copper in the home doesn't make the water better. We are prohibiting the CPVC. So my motion does not eliminate that, and that's much greater concern, and that's exactly why I think that that's a good prohibition. And for clarity, PEX is currently allowed in Downers Grove, has been since 2015, and so this would be taking away an option currently available. So it is proven to be very safe, and like I said, used predominantly in the rest of the country. So,
Anyone else? Rosa, would you please call the roll on the motion to amend?
Commissioner Davenport,
aye.
Commissioner Glover,
Aye.
Commissioner Tully,
Aye.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
No.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit,
Nay.
Mayor Burnett.
Aye, that passes 4-2. Any further comments on the base ordinance? Rosa, would you call the roll on the original motion as amended?
As amended.
Commissioner Sadowski Fugit,
Nay.
Commissioner Gilmartin,
Nay.
Commissioner Davenport,
Aye.
Commissioner Tully,
Aye.
Commissioner Glover,
Aye.
Mayor Burnett.
Aye, that too passes 4-2. And that ends our active agenda tonight. Move on to item 8 on our agenda, which is our first reading. This is the portion of the meeting where we are going to discuss items on which we do not plan to take formal action tonight. These may be items we've previously discussed or items that we are first discussing tonight, but nonetheless, they are not items on which we plan to take action. This portion of the meeting is intended to be more informational and discussionary than others, and so with that, I'll hand it over to staff.
Well, I'd like to call an audible tonight, Mayor, and along the lines of my good friend Tom, we wanted to find better ways to keep the community informed, and I thought, just given what's on the agenda tonight, maybe do the manager's report first. So it's a little bit of a lengthy report, but if you'll indulge me, I'll go ahead with that.
That's a good call, thank you.
Well, as discussed during the preparation of the long-range plan, staff will provide monthly progress reports on the council's priority action items. So we're about to get pretty busy at the council level in making policy, and here's a quick overview of the items that the council will be providing policy direction on over the last 3 months of this year. That's about 9 meetings. You can see the first 3 items on this list we're talking about tonight, and then several others providing direction on the Fairview focus area implementation steps. Council will be considering neighborhood traffic study number 9, which has some implications on the bike and ped plan and bike lanes. Council will be providing direction to staff on the negotiation of 2 collective bargaining agreements. And yes, we will be taking the first steps related to our comp plan update and all the other 5 related projects. The council will also be making a selection on the developer and development of Civic Center Lot 2. And oh yeah, in the meantime, during that time, we will also be doing the FY24 budget. So that's sort of the fourth quarter in a nutshell. Last month, the council identified the priority action items that will serve as our work plan until May of 2025. And council is familiar with the chart and shows all those items. This work plan calls for most of the items to be underway at this time in the fourth quarter of 2023. So I'm going to give an update on all the items shown here next to the yellow line. At this point, at the start of this, I'm happy to report that all of the projects are now on schedule and shown in our green indicator there. I want to dive in just a little bit. We'll start with the Civic Center project, and construction on that project continues on schedule and under budget. Proposals regarding the sale and redevelopment of Lot 2 are due to the village next week, and the council will be identifying the successful developer and preferred development for Lot 2 in December. And of course, Deputy Manager Baker will continue to provide monthly updates on this project separately with those great videos. Replacing the enterprise resource planning system. Okay, while the council has provided the policy direction on this project many, many months ago, staff continues to work on this large-scale project. The licensing module was successfully launched at the end of August, and next steps include completing the module for managing contracts and bids and launching the digital signature functions of the system. Commissioner Sadowski, if you could just mention lead service line. Of course, we have a lead service line replacement plan. Work on this plan and project continues. The village engaged a consultant a few months ago to work on creating the inventory of lead service lines. And later this week and into next week, the village will be sending letters out to about 3,000 property owners who may have lead service lines. And we will be asking them to complete an online survey that will be posted on our website in the coming days. Update to the building codes was just handled a few minutes ago. Meadowbrook Tax Increment Financing District and Redevelopment Agreement. Work on this revitalization of the Meadowbrook Shopping Center continues. As you know, we're creating a tax increment financing district and entering into a redevelopment agreement with the owner of the shopping center to facilitate significant improvements of this property. The redevelopment agreement has been drafted and staff is working through the details with the owner and the owner's attorney. Staff has been holding regular facilitation meetings with the property owner to keep this project moving forward. Next steps include finalizing the agreement and the property owner submitting the required application for the zoning approvals, and then the council will take on the steps required to initiate the tax increment financing district. Speaking of tax increment financing districts, one of our projects is to seek an extension of the Ogden-Tift district. Staff is working on obtaining that extension, and good news, recently Senator Curran agreed to sponsor the legislation required to extend this district. He's planning to file the legislation later this month in the veto session. And staff has drafted and is in the process of obtaining letters of support that we'll forward down to Springfield. We've already collected letters of support from 6 taxing bodies in the district, and we'll continue to work on obtaining the letters of support from the remaining taxing bodies. Okay, this slide provides an update on multiple projects that are being undertaken in a coordinated manner. The projects are the update to the comprehensive plan, the environmental sustainability plan, an enhanced bike and ped plan, a downtown hardscape and landscape plan, a downtown outdoor dining plan, and the implementation of recommendations related to the Fairview focus area. So a lot going on here. We're proud to say that within 10 days of the council confirming our approach to these items, staff published a request for proposal for consulting services. We will be hosting a pre-proposal meeting tomorrow, and consultant proposals are due back to us on October 27th. Then the council will engage the actual consultants likely in December. Council will start work on the Fairview sub-area implementation later this month by establishing the project boundaries, confirming and clarifying the existing comprehensive plan recommendations, and establishing a framework for the rezoning of the area. So significant work on this series of projects is happening now and will continue. Review diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. Staff continues to review and enhance our DEI practices. I continue to participate in the Metro Mayor's Caucus DEI work group, and staff has engaged a consultant for training of our staff team. Training sessions for management staff were held last week. The training sessions will continue for the balance of staff in October and November. Public safety pension stabilization. Work on this project is also well underway. This project will smooth the impact of the increasing cost for contributions to the police and fire pension funds, smoothing out the impacts on the taxpayers. We have received the required contribution amounts for FY24, and we are proposing a stabilization reserve, or a stabilization assignment, if you will, within the general fund as part of the proposed FY24 budget, which will be published later this month and will be considered by the council in November and December. Video gaming will play out tonight as the council starts on this project. In addition to the priority action items, we are working on 3 other significant projects. I mentioned earlier that we are now working on 2 collective bargaining agreements. negotiations on both a contract with our police patrol officers, which expires in April of '24, and a contract amendment adding battalion chiefs to our existing contract with our firefighters. They're both underway. Staff will be seeking policy direction from the council on these two contracts later this month. And finally, staff and the Human Service Commission have been implementing the Social Services Gap Analysis Work Plan, which was approved by the council in late 2022. Nearly all of the items in this work plan, including significant efforts to increase awareness about the Social Services Referral Program, have been completed. The village has posted information about the program on a regular basis throughout the year using multiple platforms. After analyzing the data of program usage, we identified specific target audiences and published content on a variety of media to reach those specific audiences. Program information is now included in our police and fire public education efforts. We operated information booths at several community events this year. Our social worker, Heather Lippy, has made many presentations to community groups and other governments. We've worked with District 58 to include information within the schools and in their communication with parents. We've identified a not-for-profit agency which provides transportation services to seniors and introduced this service to the Downers Grove community. I'm proud to say that only 2 items remain on this work plan, and we will be wrapping those up by the end of the year. So I appreciate the indulgence, Mayor, but I thought that was an important component of keeping the community informed and the council up to speed on those actions. And with that, we can move right into first reading. The first 2 items are consideration.
Mr. Mayor, may I ask a question? If the answer is no, that's fine. We have juggled this agenda just a little bit, so I'd like to try and accommodate that. Go ahead on down here to the podium. Realize, please, hang on one second. Hang on one second. Please, everybody realize that questions, whether they're earlier in the public comments portion or on specific agenda items, may not get answered right this evening. Oftentimes they don't, but we do want that information, and we are looking for those questions. So please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just have one question to the gentleman that just did this presentation. How much is this going to cost? All of it?
That's not a question we can answer tonight. This is a subject.
You can't answer that question?
This is no, off the top of my head, I can't. Any more than any other. Hang on, you're very close to being done talking. Any more than any other one line item in a $60 million budget. If you'd like more information about this, please give the end guy your information, and we will get you all of the stuff that led up to this, which will talk about how it's being implemented. That's what you can do.
Thank you very much. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Dave.
Tonight's first reading contains 4 items. The first 2 items will be presented by our Community Development Director, Stan Popovich, and they concern rezonings of residential properties. Stan.
Thank you, Manager Fieldman. Good evening, Mayor and council members. The first item is a zoning map amendment. It's 1634 63rd Street. It's located just a little bit north of Downers Grove South High School on 63rd Street. Specifically, it's the northeast corner of 63rd Street and Springside. Property is currently zoned R1, which is a single-family detached house zoning district, and they're proposing to rezone it to R3, which is another single-family zoning district. The proposal, petitioners are wishing to construct an addition onto the existing house, and the setbacks will more align with the property lines and the boundaries of the property. The Planning Commission considered this case at the September meeting and found that the standards for approval were met and recommended approval. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for the mayor and council tonight. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Stan. Any questions from the audience on zoning considerations at 1634 63rd Street? Any questions or comments from the council?
It's consistent with the zoning around it.
Correct. Please continue, Stan.
Okay, the next one is a zoning map amendment at 3854 Glendenning Road. This is on the northeast side of the village. Specifically, it's at the northwest corner of Glendenning and 39th Street. The property is currently vacant. The property is currently zoned R1. The petitioner is requesting an R2 zoning, again, similar to the previous case, which is the setbacks make a little bit more sense. Petitioner wishes to construct a single-family home on the property. The Planning Commission considered the case on their September meeting and found that the standards for approval were met and recommended approval. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer those for the mayor and council. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience concerning potential rezoning at 3854 Glendenning? Questions or comments from the council? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Forgot Martin.
Repeat my prior comment about the consistency of zoning in the area, but also it's not lost on me, Mr. Popovich, that both of these lots are corner lots,
Yes, yes, they are.
which creates particular challenges, shall we say.
There are
That wasn't a question, that was just a statement.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate it.
Anything else? Mike, go
I
ahead.
just, I'll just elaborate as well. My understanding is that when unincorporated areas were brought into the village, they're by default, they're zoned R1, and then it's looked at on a case-by-case basis, and that's what we're doing tonight. In fact, the R3 zoning. R3 on this one as well.
R2 on this
R2.
one.
R3 on the other one.
Not D2, just R2.
Right. It's consistent with the area, and what's being proposed is proper. Yes.
Good.
Yes.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, thank you, Stan.
Thank you, Mayor.
The next item on tonight's first reading agenda is consideration of a motion regarding a Main Street traffic safety improvements. This was a priority action item for us the last several years, and here to present background information on this item is our Director of Engineering, Scott Vasco.
Thank you, David. Good evening, Mayor, council members. Tonight I'm going to go ahead and provide an update as well as a review of the Main Street improvements that we've been going through. So as an update to the project, we had a neighborhood meeting on September 21st at Village Hall to present residents with information about the improvements, get a chance to hear feedback about the project, and just overall explaining of some of the project implementation. The overall response of the improvements was positive at the meeting, we thought. So, as you know, the proposed improvements were in partnership with District 99 in the village back in 2019 with the primary goal of providing pedestrian safety at both high schools. Jim Schwartz Consultants prepared a study, did some extensive public engagement, and the study was accepted by you guys in 2020 in February. From there, Village Council approved the contract with our consultant, H.R. Green, prepared Phase 1 engineering study, including a preliminary design report, and then last July, Council directed staff to present the draft PDR to IDOT for approval. The PDR was approved for IDOT in February of 23, and Council approved Phase 2 design in May of this year. A couple of the key findings from that report. One of the key findings was that left turn vehicles currently impede traffic flow. The lack of dedicated left turn lanes requires vehicles to stop in the inside travel lanes while waiting to turn. This causes vehicles to perform unsafe maneuvers such as stopping abruptly, weaving in and out of traffic to avoid stop vehicles. I'm sure you guys have all experienced that on Main Street at one time or another. In addition, the southbound lanes currently merge from 2 lanes down to 1 through Franklin, and many drivers wait till the last minute and then try to merge back into traffic, which is always an issue. Another issue we found is that there was a lack of signal programming due to the lack of dedicated turn lanes. So for instance, at Prairie right now, the Prairie signal in the morning gives a left turn arrow to southbound traffic, and then in the afternoon it gives one to northbound traffic. Whether there's cars turning there or not, the signal's programmed to give that left turn. It doesn't know that you're turning or going straight, so that causes backups there. So based on the design report, we've got a summary here of the proposed improvements. The first change we wanted to do is go with 1 lane of traffic in each direction with an addition of a protected left turn lane. We're expecting this change will be significantly increase the safety through smoother traffic flow, providing 1 clear merge location. By separating left turn vehicles from other vehicles, this should result in a reduction in driver confusion and delays. Also, the change in lane configurations allows us to do a couple other safety features. The signals will be optimized to provide left turn arrows when needed. Dedicated bike lanes will be added between Grant and Franklin to give bicyclists connection from the downtown to the high school. The reduction in lanes allows the bike lanes to be located within the existing roadway without moving any of the curves or removing parkway trees. The bike lane markings will be in green, which will also enhance safety for the bicyclists and visually separate drive lanes from the bike lanes. Some of the other features, curb extensions will be utilized at Grant Street to shorten the crossing distance for pedestrians at the intersection, provide a logical termination point for the bike lanes. Pedestrian level lighting will be added to enhance visibility for pedestrians and bicyclists. We've also added an eastbound left turn arrow at Franklin to improve intersection operations. I'll show you guys that in a moment. So this slide here pretty much shows the configuration of the corridor. There's going to be one through lane of traffic in each direction with the center lane for left-hand turn movements, a green painted bike lane on the outside, and then there'll also be pedestrian level lighting on each side of the road, spaced approximately every 150 feet down the way. This configuration will be used along the entire corridor and allows us to have alignment of all the left turn lanes. As you can see there, it allows us to mirror the intersections and the left turn lanes at the intersections, and it removes any transitions that we're going to have through intersections. So this slide here shows a blown up version of the Main and Grant area where it shows the curbs on the west side will be bumped out to shorten the walking distance for pedestrians, and also it'll be the termination point for the bike lanes. These improvements will enhance pedestrian safety. So in these next few slides, we're going to talk about the intersection at Franklin. So on this one, as you can see, this is existing signal eastbound Franklin, and here's the movement we're talking about going from eastbound to northbound on Main. So this is Franklin as we see it today. It currently looks like this, and if you look at the signal, it's just two circle balls. It does not allow for a left-hand turn by itself. The consultant's going to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and modify that, and we're going to have a dedicated left turn lane as well as a left-hand turn signal for that, which will help with pedestrians getting across the street. So with that, we're at the point now where at this point we've got HR Green completing the final engineering design, and we'll go ahead and submit to IDOT in November of this year if you guys go ahead and approve that. And then the plan is we'll come to you guys in 2024 with the final IGA, and then IDOT will do bidding and award of the contract in April or May next year. Construction to happen sometime summer and fall. And as always, we'll have construction updates once that project gets going. And with that, I will open it up to questions.
So just in a nutshell, Mayor, we're asking the council, should we proceed with this project, and we're looking for your feedback.
Thank you both. Thanks, Scott. Are there any audience comments or questions about this? Please come on down to the podium and state your name and let us know what's on your mind.
Good evening, Council. My name is Charles Kucha. I'm at 7321 Bayberry Road, Downers Grove. I was just going to ask the gentleman, been in other states where left-hand turns would be a flashing yellow arrow, so you don't have to wait a long time with no traffic coming. You could always turn left with caution, but it would speed up left-hand turns without really creating a problem, I think. So it's more convenient for me as a driver.
Thanks. Others on the Main Street subject?
Keep making me come back here, guys. Okay, I'm definitely in the minority on this one. I'm all about slowing down traffic, as you know, but at this time I can't get behind this project, mostly because the village has no plan B if indeed Main Street gets so bogged down that the traffic moves from Main Street one block east or west to Highland or Forest. The village traffic consultant's model says it won't, but what if it does? For over 20 years, I've been modeling traffic, among other things, and I can tell you that I can make a model tell me anything I want. There's no way, you could tweak these things. Also, for one summer, I wasted a bunch of time getting a project management certification, which has come in handy once in a while. It had a lot to do with memorizing a bunch of different things, but basically coming up with a bunch of different plan Bs if your main project fails. So it's beyond shocking that if this model does fail, the village does not have a plan B, and we're about to spend $2.1 million on a project to narrow Main Street, and has no plan B if indeed traffic does get bogged down and decides to move over to Highland and Forest, as we know, and as we've already stated, already has more than enough traffic on it above a residential street, at a carrier level, street level. With the exception of Commissioner Davenport, because he's relatively new to the seat, everybody sitting here has always been on the record saying that you don't want to solve one problem and create a problem somewhere else, so I hope you'll consider this. On the positive, if the project does move forward, which I'm sure it will, I am very glad that you guys decided to listen to us and start the narrowing one block south of Ogden, because when it was originally proposed, you were planning on just having it at one lane right there, and that would not have worked. I'm happy that you've come up with a plan, or appear to have come up with a plan with light poles to have downlighting to minimize light pollution going to people's homes. I am very happy, and I'm bummed that Rich is not here, but I'm very happy that you guys have decided to listen to us and incorporate the Colvany left turn arrow. That was originally put in, or suggested to be put in, back up. So the stop, it used to be a stop sign there, and then 25 years ago, our street said, hey, this is totally crazy with the school across the street. We need to put a stoplight in there to make it safe to drop off the kids. Well, we did that. When we did that, we actually created our cut-through on our traffic. So right now, it's a designated right turn lane going southbound on Main Street, turning westbound onto Franklin. So all this left turn arrow is doing is making the S-curve go northbound now, which is great. Other than a no plan B, my major problem with this is at the intersection of Main and Prairie. The plan has a bike lane stopping halfway down the block between Prairie and Franklin, where the dedicated right turn lane currently is and will be in the future on Franklin, turning onto Franklin. I think this is a huge mistake. We can't abandon bikers in the middle of a block by just taking away their bike lane. So here's my ask. Stop the bike path at the north side of Prairie, and this will give the bikers a heads up that they either need to move to a sidewalk or move to Forest Avenue or Highland. The second thing is open up Main Street back to 2 lanes right south of Prairie, because right there, that's the bog down point. When you're coming down south and you get to that point, if you're sitting at that stoplight, you're going to move over to Forest, but by opening that up to 2 lanes, you're going to continue to move forward and go merge into the right turn lane, or you can turn into the church parking lot. This is not costing the village any extra money. What it's doing is just getting rid of that major choke point. And as you know, it's a short block. It's only about 50 or 60 feet we're talking about. So please consider doing that. If we can help open up that exact location where it gets bogged down, we can avert additional cut-through traffic on streets west of Main Street. We're only changing it a half a block. And if you say that people aren't going to do that because of the no left turn sign at Forest and Prairie, I can tell you people don't listen to signs. Some do, but a lot don't. One last thing associated with safety with this project, and I'll bring it up one more time, is bollards. And I didn't even know what that word was until about 6 months ago. But bollards are those little 4-foot posts that you see in front of convenience stores or in front of schools that prevent cars from hitting something on the other side of that. So I would love to see a series of bollards put at Grant and Main Street to protect kids from getting hit by potential cars coming there. I've been told there's 3 reasons that staff is being told that they can't do it. One is ADA concerns, which I don't understand because we can space them out appropriately and will allow the flow of a wheelchair and or kids passing through. And there's only about 50 to 75 passing through per light, so there's plenty of time or plenty of space for people to move through there. There are utilities underground at that corner. You are bumping that out, like you just said. So even, in my opinion, even if you're not installing them properly, which is about 4 feet below grade and 4 feet above grade, even if you have it only 2 or 2.5 feet below grade and you bolt them down around the perimeter, you're still going to stop a car or at least slow a car down. The last thing, kind of troubling, that staff doesn't think it's necessary because there is no evidence of overtracking, meaning cars haven't historically been driving over the curb. To me, I think that's a shocking statement. I don't want to wait until a tragedy happens. I want to do something to prevent it. So while we're doing all of this beautification of Main Street, putting the lights in, putting the bike path in, I don't think it's too much to ask to go back and possibly revisit putting some bollards on each side of Main Street, on the 2 corners of Grant and along the west side of Main Street right in front of the school. Thank you.
Thank you. Others on the Main Street project? Okay. Council comments, questions, discussions. What do you think about Main Street? Chris, please.
Yeah, can you remind us, I seem to remember there being some state funds that are going towards this. Can you remind us what that is?
There is. So the total overall cost is $2.1 million. 70% of it will be state funding. 30% will be us.
Okay. I would just say my comment is I love everything about this and look forward to supporting it. Thanks for the hard work.
Others? Leslie?
I am appreciative of kind of everything that we've done, the changes in the signals. I know that was something that we weren't sure we were going to be able to accomplish, so it's nice to see that. The bike lanes appreciate the dark skylights, so it will not, one, impede, people's views, but also then, it's better, again, for the environment. I do wonder, instead of kind of shifting this whole plan, if there is a way that moving forward, we could potentially think of either striping or signage just to let people know that the bike lanes are ending, or, just something small that we could do. Or consider if it seems to be an issue or comes up later. In terms of, the plan, we've seen this sort of plan work at other places, so my mind goes straight to Fairview Avenue because I live just off of Fairview, and I see that merge, going south all the time, and shockingly, it is one zipper merge area that tends to work well from things that I have seen. So, there is a little bit of, I'm sure, data that went into not just the projections and the modeling, but also kind of similar areas around town. One thing that I did mention when we've talked about this with staff is I would love to see some sort of, and gosh, I wish I knew the technical term of it, but it's almost like those little rubber bumps that you kind of put to designate that there's a bike lane there. So it's not necessarily something that would impede snow plows or anything else like that, but it would at least alert the driver if they start getting too close to a bike lane that they shouldn't be there. And I know there are kind of those like small poles that you can pull out in the winter, just again as a visual for folks that the bike lanes are there. So it's one thing that I would like us to consider. Obviously, I am in full support of this, and that's always something that we could look into later, but it is one thing that I would like to see. So I'm really happy that these safety improvements are moving forward. I apologize for being late, but actually the reason I was late is because there was a pretty severe accident on 355 South coming home from my daughter's hockey practice. And so anything that we can do, which safety is always on my mind, to improve safety and reduce accidents and any concerns that we may have. It looked pretty rough. Little shaken up after that I think we're moving in the right direction with this, and I'm happy to support it. So thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Danny?
Yeah, I'm also in full support of this plan. I too live right on Fairview, or off Fairview. My prior house was at the intersection of Fairview and Ogden, and if anybody was going to see cut-through traffic in the neighborhood, we would have saw it. So I don't believe that it's going to cause any type of traffic diversion. And of course, safety is the #1 priority, so I'm in full support.
Thank you.
I'm excited to see this move forward. I was, as you all know, I was on the District 99 school board for several years prior to joining everyone here in council, and this was something that this was all started with a tragedy with Beth Dunlap, and we need to make our areas around our schools safer. This is, being categorized to some extent as we're losing lanes, and certainly there definitely is a change, and there is a loss of a northbound vehicular lane and a southbound vehicular lane, but there are left turn lanes, and we're now making room on the road for bicyclists. I've never felt very safe riding my bike down this stretch. So this is something that's really, really needed, and I'm deeply appreciative of the work that's been done. And it's an excellent plan. Perhaps, listening to comments and such, maybe there's some additional tweaks that can be done. But at this point, I'm saying move forward. And thank you.
Thank you, Martin.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is an exciting, creative, and innovative plan for this area. It has a lot of aesthetic appeal to it, and it's something that will really create a place, a memorable place for anybody who goes through it. And I think if you ask most people, boy, would you like to see something like this in our community? Yeah, I would. And would you like to separate people from traffic, which is the definition of pedestrian safety? Sure, yeah, that's a good idea. Would you like to see more bike lanes? Absolutely, I want to see more bike lanes. And would you like to see some beautification? Yeah, sure, that would be great. It's awesome. Until it happens in their neighborhood. And then suddenly it's, well, hold on a minute, this is going to change my life. I'm in support of those things, but I've got some issues here. And we saw that over the years with the sidewalk matrix. I mean, in concept, everybody was, sidewalks are great, separate people from traffic. Wonderful. Traffic programs that are going on with stop signs, bike and pedestrian plans. Everybody is very supportive in concept, but I was not lost on me was the fact that, yes, there were only about 30 people at the meeting for this, but they were split. About half were in support, but actually half were opposed of the neighbors, and the other half of the other remaining half, quarter were in support, and a quarter had concerns. So I think, again, this is definitely something that as a community, we should remain behind as a community and support, but I also want to be cognizant of the neighborhood and making sure that we are addressing, to the extent that we can, those things that without undermining the benefits to the community generally of the plan, that to the extent that we can make reasonable adjustments, and we've done this with, for example, the sidewalk matrix, we made some adjustments to preserve trees and other things. Some of those small changes, again, such as long as they're not violative of transportation rules or things like that, or engineering faux pas, I am in support of the project, but would like to continue to be consistently supportive of addressing some of the feedback from the neighborhood, because this is being done to them. Yes, it's a great project, the community is behind, but to the extent that we can figure out ways to embrace and address some of the concerns that have been raised, I would like to see those continued efforts. For the record, I'm not suggesting those efforts haven't been underway. In fact, we're seeing them already. The neighborhood meeting was done for a purpose. We're having these continuing conversations. But I will continue to listen to the things that have been raised from the neighborhood and find that sweet spot where both the community and the neighborhood are in harmony.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Mike, sure.
Just a couple quick comments. This plan was conceived in conjunction with the neighborhood. There were several meetings at North High, and pretty well attended in the past, and so I think this has been a pretty great process all the way to this point, in asking for and involving neighborhood feedback, and we definitely should consider, continue to do that and be responsive as Commissioner Tully is suggesting. But just want to put the record straight that this is something that we've been working at for a while, and in great partnership, I think, with the schools as well as the neighbors affected. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm in support of this as well. I have been, like many up here, part of this process for quite a while now as it's worked its way through schools and through the village as well. It is also consistent with the idea that we would be trying to, I think the way we've talked about it in the last several months, is put pedestrians first. That is easier said than done. That's just, if you were designing a community from scratch, you'd have a lot more freedom there. But this is an opportunity to embrace some of that, and I think we should. There's every reason to believe this will function very much like Fairview Avenue does. Fairview Avenue is a fairly efficient route. I do have a couple of things that I guess some questions about process maybe first, because they lead to design issues. I think 70% was the number was thrown out. $1.5 million is coming from the state to do this. How does that work in terms of this group of people decides they want to change a component, right? But 70% of the money is not ours, and there's been a design floated through their process to get that initial allocation. Tell me a little bit about how that works.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Mayor, you're on the right track there. Because it's primarily funded through federal dollars flowing through the state, we have very little flexibility to change the plans at this point, and might even be close to no flexibility. And Director Vasco was talking about those PDRs. IDOT speak for, these are the plans. And so you've seen in some of the council questions, can we make a change here, a change there? I think it's incredibly limited. Did I describe that correctly?
It's an important thing to put some context around, because I think everybody up here probably has an item or two, and certainly as we get input from the public, where there's going to be more items that I'm certain some folks up here will nod in agreement. That sounds like a good idea. I don't know the specific scope of change that is allowed. Sounds like, I understand it's very little, but a couple things that do interest me. This separation issue, we can't probably get the separation that I think I would like, I'm sure others up here would like. But whether they're, if you just think about stripe width, we are going to put a stripe down on the pavement. So there are places where they snowplow successfully over a variety of things, including reflectors. There's some depressive versions of that. I'd like to know what's possible there. I think about the side of a highway where when you veer off a little, you start to get a little rumble. These are still, it's still a big street with a lot of cars, and we're hoping people start using their bikes. And so I'd like to know if there were ways to do something a little more than a stripe on the pavement there. And then the whole bollard thing is interesting. We have those at Prairie, and they kind of stand out. I think they're just on the northeast corner, maybe. But if you go back to what started this whole thing, it was an accident that nobody wishes to see again. So if we're taking steps to try and create a different environment, a more protective environment at a corner would be helpful. We're not alone in that. You see them in the city of Chicago all the time. And I'm sure there are rules about widths and lanes and how much right-of-way we have and a lot of stuff. But it's something I would like to hear a lot more detail about, because I think both of those things would make this a little bit better for its intended purposes. So I'm supportive of it, and will encourage us to continue and go forward with this project. But I would like to, if it was just up to me and I was writing the check, we'd add some things. So I'd like to know more about that.
We will check in with IDOT directly again and ask even more specific questions that have been raised by the council members tonight, and we'll get back to you before the motion vote is taken.
Another thing, not for tonight, but if you could treat it as a council question, I want to understand the process. This is not new. Obviously, we get a lot of projects that are partially funded by others. Okay? But what I don't think I've really ever gotten a good, clear understanding of is what is the process when it doesn't go as planned. So whether you have change orders or you have value engineering or whatever the coded word of the day might be, how's that work in terms of who's paying what?
We have some experience in that too. We'll be happy to
I'm sure. No doubt. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
And the final item on tonight's first reading agenda is consideration of an ordinance establishing video gaming regulations. So we'll pull up the presentation here. Okay, we talked earlier tonight about the council's priority action items. This item appears on our 2023 to 2025 priority action item list, with that arrow there. The council, during the priority action item long-range planning process, directed staff to prepare for consideration an ordinance which would permit the operation of video gaming for restaurants with on-premise liquor license in areas outside of the downtown. And that project description goes on to say things we should be considering as we go through this ordinance are the number of licenses available, the number of terminals permitted at each location, the idea of creating a separate area for video gaming, and also establishing fees. So this is the direction provided by the council on this priority action item. Was provided earlier just last month. So staff has developed a draft ordinance. There's about 3 slides on this, so I'll just go through. Here are the key points of the draft ordinance for consideration. First, a local Village of Downers Grove video gaming license would be required, and the video gaming licenses would be tied to liquor licenses and would be available for the Restaurant 1, Restaurant 2, Recreational 1 and 2, and Club liquor license classifications. Regarding the downtown, video gaming in the downtown under this approach would be limited to Class C and rec licensed establishments only, which currently are the Moose and the Tivoli Bowl. To To facilitate this, a new downtown-R, or downtown restaurant liquor license, would be created for restaurants in the downtown, which would address not only the policy direction initially provided by the council about geographic issues, but would also help us address how we go about licensing their outdoor cafe, outdoor dining, liquor service activities. Therefore, video gaming under this ordinance would not be permitted under a DT restaurant licensed establishment. For further consideration, the maximum number of video gaming licenses initially available would be 10, with a maximum number of terminals at each licensed establishment of 6, for a total of 60 gaming terminals in our village would be available. Establishments must hold a liquor license in good standing for 12 months prior to applying for a video gaming license. This ordinance would also prohibit video gaming cafes or a standalone business whose only or primary operation is video gaming. The terminals under this ordinance, the gaming devices themselves, would be required to be placed in a separate room with walls 7 feet high. The size of that room would be limited to a maximum of 200 square feet or 25% of the seating and dining area, whichever is less. And signs prohibiting anyone under 21 from entering would also have to be posted. And finally, the terminals shall not be visible from outside of the establishments, and noise from the terminals shall not be heard outside of that gaming room. These establishments must be located 100 feet or more away from any church or school. And of course, because it's tied to liquor licensing, if there's any issue with the liquor license involving a suspension or revocation due to a violation, the same thing would happen to the video gaming license and vice versa. And staff is proposing an effective date of January 1st, 2024. We hope we've done a good job of capturing the policy direction that was provided for consideration going into this topic, and we're happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Thank you, Dave. As we've been doing, we're going to take council comments after we hear from the audience. This is a first reading event tonight. As I mentioned before, at the very beginning of the meeting, I do want to make sure everybody gets heard. We have a history of doing that. Sometimes some would say to our detriment, but nonetheless, that's why we have these meetings. We do want to hear from people. There's another challenge that I'm trying to manage, which is that we're supposed to talk to each other as well. And these first readings are intended to be discussionary kinds of meetings also. And so not a lot of good conversation happens at midnight. So it doesn't look like a huge crowd, and if everybody stays to their 5 minutes, we should be okay. If we can avoid repeating each other, that'd be great. But if it gets too late, I may pause public comments so that we can talk a little. It doesn't mean public comments are over. Everybody's going to get heard at some point. But we are trying to manage two things, taking the public input that we need and we want, as well as the component of this meeting which is structured for us to deliberate ideas that we're talking about in front of us. So with that, if you would like to talk about gaming, if you'd like to give us some comments, please come down to the podium. Try and keep yourselves to 5 minutes and let us know what's on your mind.
Apologies if I stepped in front of anybody. I might have to leave here. Thanks, guys. Video gambling. Why isn't it okay to have it downtown, but it's fair to have it elsewhere? Don't the other neighborhoods also matter? If over 130 existing establishments in Downers Grove qualify under the new ordinance, how would the village fairly sell the proposed 10 licenses? With only 10 licenses, what is the real expected incremental revenues the village can expect? 100,000, 250,000? What else does the village have before it that could potentially bring 100,000 to 250,000? Do we need to consider any kind of business at any social cost to bring money in? Are we that desperate? Can we instead add a nickel to every burger that I have down on Main Street or wherever else, which would be the same rounding error in a $60 million annual budget, and no one would care? Is 10 licenses entrance into a slippery slope, and next year it'll be 10 more, the following year 10 more, and then potentially come downtown? Have we done enough for the restaurant owners, or is this really even our job to tell them how to have a successful business model? And should we allow this if they claim that they can't compete with other towns? Will this affect our property values? 20 to 30 years ago, Ogden had some pretty sketchy stuff going on, and I think we, for the most part, cleaned that up. But unfortunately, it's been replaced with vape stores, CBD stores. Recently, a ketamine Special K opened up next to the Trader Joe's in Ogden, which is definitely needed, but the way that they glamorized it with a psychedelic name and the company name, I just don't think it's appropriate. Do we now need to add flags and flashing neon signs associated with video gambling along these different roads? Should we have signage allowed at all? Is there really increased crime and addiction associated with video gambling sites? Do we already have enough video gambling establishments in the immediate area, or is video gambling inevitable for us? There is 18 towns in DuPage County that allow it. Only a small handful of towns were added since 2014, 9 years ago, and none have been added in the last 2 years. Who is really asking for it? Is it a handful of small restaurants or 51% of the villages, of the residents in the village? Is this consistent with the Downers Grove brand, whatever that may be? In the 6.5 years following the video gambling going live in September of 2012, some 30,000 video slot and poker machines have been installed at 6,800 locations around Illinois, more than any other state in the U.S. Gamblers here have lost over $5 billion playing the algorithm-driven machines, which have been described as electronic morphine and crack cocaine of gambling. Is this what we want Downers Grove to be and contribute to? Although, should we care if people want to throw their money away? Who are we to tell them? Maybe, maybe not. These are some of the arguments and categories that you're going to hear about all tonight, and you're going to hear about debated in the future. I, for one, am not in favor of video gambling anywhere in Downers Grove, but that's just my one opinion. Everyone here is entitled to have their opinion heard, and everyone's opinion is correct for them. It's their opinion. It's not up to me to tell anyone how to live their life, spend their money, or what they do with their free time. You guys were all elected to represent all of the Downers Grove residents. From listening to you guys talk about this topic during the long-range plan sessions, I currently see this vote as a 4-3 vote in favor of video gambling. As such, I don't believe you're representing all the residents. You have basically made this a coin toss. In my opinion, like this, you cannot and should not pass on a split vote that has something that's so highly controversial, and I honestly can't remember of anything this highly controversial that you guys passed on a split vote before. Usually you're a 7-0 or 6-1. In my opinion, therefore, this should absolutely move to a binding or non-binding referendum. This is not voting on a traffic signal or a stop sign. This is voting on something that will change the makeup of our Downers Grove and will affect all of the residents. Glen Ellen shared the same sentiment that Downers Grove does and didn't want it downtown because they wanted to preserve their family-friendly, historic downtown area. But they also didn't want to be accused of unfair business practices, so they voted no across the board. Naperville also had a split vote like we do, so they decided to send theirs to a referendum and do right by their citizens to let the residents vote the fate of their own town. If Downers Grove really wants video gaming, so be it, the referendum will pass. I can guarantee you less than 5% of residents even know about this. Every time I'm in a different location, I bring it up because I always want to learn, I always want to hear other people's opinion, and it's quite possible I would change my mind. But people just don't know about this, and when we do discuss it, they don't want it. They're not in favor of it. Last time around, if you remove all the people living outside of Downers Grove, last time the comments came in, 90% residents were against this. Many people otherwise would have been here tonight, but it's very hard to take 3 to 4 hours out of their time on a weeknight with kids and other job-related things. Hundreds more have already sent emails in to the previous council and to this council, and they don't feel that they need to spend more time sending the same emails over and over again. You may think you are doing your civic duty and job you are elected to do if you choose to send this, you may think you're not doing your civic duty and the job you're elected to do if you choose to send this to referendum vote. But I would say you're doing the exact opposite if you vote 4-3 in favor of something like this that will literally change the face of DG. I am saying, please send this to referendum to vote. This will tear the village apart if you guys vote in favor or against it on a 4-3 vote. Either way, let the village decide their own fate, and that's the only way you guys are going to get off the hook. Otherwise, for decades to come, you guys are going to be held responsible for or against whatever happens here. Thank you.
My name is Rich Matthews, 5603 Duran Drive. Many comments that were just made are not backed in fact. They're not. They're backed in fear. I asked earlier how much this gentleman said the budget was going to cost for all the things we wanted to do here. I heard two things. Blah, 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 and no answer. If I were the mayor, I would have said it would cost $18.4 million, whatever the number is. I would have given the number. That's the number. Here's the point about video gaming. It is going to give us additional revenue that we desperately need because guess what? I am a homeowner. I've lived in this city for 13 years. My wife was born and raised in the south side of Chicago. We are as Chicago as you're going to be. But you know what? We pay too much in taxes. We pay too much to live here every year. And why do you think there's flight going out of Illinois all over the United States? People are sick of it. They can't stand it anymore. So if we have an opportunity to have a different revenue stream, why don't we seek it out? That's what this really comes down to, isn't it? It is a revenue stream. Are we going to poison our children? Is there going to be rampant drinking in the streets? Is that what this is going to turn into? There is no evidence of that whatsoever. In fact, it is quite the opposite. Frankly, if you want to clean up Downers Grove, revoke every liquor license. Revoke every one. Because that is 10 times more impactful than gaming is in the United States. And there are facts to back this up. So what are we talking about? We're talking about fear. We're talking about facts that are not in evidence. But let's just talk about our community. Is this really, really going to mess up our community by having gaming in certain areas, 10 slots, 20 slots? That's going to ruin us entirely? That's what we're saying? I'm sorry, I don't buy it. You shouldn't buy it. Doesn't make any sense at all. As a resident of Downers Grove, I'm asking you that if we can find additional revenue streams, wherever they might be, we need to take them seriously. This has been discussed for too long. It's been in limbo for too long, and it's time for this august body to make a decision. Thank you.
Tim McCahill, Downers Grove, thank you very much. I'm not trying to repeat what the first gentleman said, but I don't envy the position you're in. I mean, I really don't. I mean, this to me makes absolutely no sense. I was born in Downers Grove, moved back my wife to move here to Sunny Glenelg, and I won. Proud that I won that battle, but I'm not right now. I am floored that anyone here would support video gaming. I really cannot comprehend it. It does nothing good. Go hang out at Walsh's Pub and watch what happens at night. Go watch the Moose at night and see what happens at those machines. There's nothing good that comes from it. What I did tonight, rather than go over arguments, I read all your bios. I read about why you were elected to Downers Grove. We're asking people that are data-driven. We've heard data. There's no good data behind video gaming. I read one commissioner said they want Downers Grove to be the greatest place to live. Please explain to me how video gaming does anything to support that. We have school board members. We have former mayors. I truly, I'm driving to St. Louis after this. I pushed my trip off because I'm just so floored that this is even coming up again. And to me, I think the biggest thing is, people need to vote. I have not met one single person that is in support of video gaming outside of this council. I mean, I truly, I have not met one other than the gentleman who just spoke. So, I mean, in true sincerity, I think we need to find a way to vote for this, because I promise you, there's a lot less people than 51% that want video gaming in Downers Grove. Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Laura Hoyes, Downers Grove resident since 1985. A few weeks ago, I addressed this council on the topic of video gaming. I spoke in favor of video gaming along Ogden Avenue and the 75th Street corridors. I did not know the proposed ordinance that says it's either downtown or everywhere else. I didn't know that we couldn't select the corridors where it would be limited to, but nonetheless, that's what I said. I noted the increased revenue will help business owners, and I expressly stated that I oppose video gaming in downtown Downers Grove. I believed then, as I do now, that video gaming will help businesses recover from the impact of COVID-19. So after having stated publicly my support for limited video gaming, last week on September 27th, Tom Schroeder sent me an email saying, and I quote, He was 100% against video gaming in Downers Grove, which I think that's clear. Quote, "I can't get behind anyone or anything that is in favor of video gaming." And, quote, "I won't go into why I'm so against it, but that's the kiss of death for me." So that set me back a bit, because I've known Tom and he's been a friend for quite some time. So I responded, "I now understand better than I did before that you feel strongly about video gaming. It is my hope that we can resolve the hard feelings through conversation. To that end, I just called your number." Tom didn't call me back, but later that same night, he sent me an email and said, "To me, you spoke in public saying you were in favor of video gaming. You won't change my mind, and I'm not going to attempt to change your mind. But then," he said, "if I were you, I'd speak at next Tuesday's Village Council meeting and say you've had a change of heart after speaking to many constituents and that you don't support video gaming anywhere." So, he is encouraging me in that message to change my mind and to tell you that I've changed my mind. And I understand and respect that he's passionate. Tom knows that I plan to run for DuPage County Board. I'm an advocate for the taxpayer and the local business owners. They've been hit hard. That's where my frame of reference comes from. But unfortunately, Tom noted that I had initially considered running for state rep or circuit clerk and said that he thought I may have a bit of an identity situation going on, which is not true. The video gaming is only hurting your chances even more. And by that, I guess he means hurting my chances of succeeding to get on the county board. I don't know. At that point, I felt it was insulting and it was intimidation, coercion, however I interpret it, that I didn't like what he was saying to me, but I kept quiet. And at that point, I didn't plan to be here tonight. But then yesterday, Monday, October 2nd, Tom texted me twice.
Hey, Laura,
text in the
hey,
morning.
Laura, stop that.
Yes.
Stop that. We're really interested in your opinion of the ordinance that's proposed tonight. We're not really here to manage your relationship with Tom.
I respect that.
Hang on. He said, she said, yeah, I got the...
Okay.
It's not for tonight, okay?
But the point is,
I
Mr.
cut you off.
Thank you.
And you've got, by my math, you got about 3 minutes left.
Thank you.
Because I cut you off. You're adding one on the backside. But please make this about your opinion about gaming, okay?
Okay. So I had stated my opinion weeks ago. In the first text, I was encouraged to change my opinion or it would be a big mistake. It came across in a negative way. In the second, I was told that he needed to report back to the group of people to let him know what I was going to do tonight. At that point, so yes, I stood by my decision in my mind, but I thought I better come here because if Tom is doing this, if he's contacting me, one resident with one opinion, saying, it's really urgent that you get back to me today because I have to report back. I was left to wonder, well, what group did Tom need to report back to? That's really my point, Mr. Mayor. What appears to be political wrangling on behalf of council decision makers is at best inappropriate and at worst actionable intimidation. I did not reply to the messages and I'm not going to allow myself to be intimidated. I'm not going to compromise my principles and I'm going to maintain my opinion. I am an honest person of strong character. There are residents who agree with me on the topic of video gaming, and I am sure residents who don't. In either case, I'm entitled to express my beliefs without being threatened. Moving forward, I intend to support our small business owners in Downers Grove and will not be bullied into changing my mind or my position for political expediency. I urge this body to give video gaming proposal, the video gaming proposal fair consideration, because it deserves that. And I urge everyone to avoid it in engaging in intimidation tactics to anyone and to respect each other's point of view. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Charles Kucha. And I've listened to the people who have been up here before, and the first gentleman, everybody's welcome to their opinion. The first gentleman made it seem like it was the end of the world if Downers Grove gets video gaming. And the brand is going to be ruined, like this big dark cloud's going to come down here in the village and is never going to go away. I don't agree with that. I think the video gaming is a good source of income for the businesses. I agree more with the second gentleman. He has some very good points. It allows the small local businesses to earn some money and our village, which is needed. I'm sure nobody ever wants to not make some money on something. And I've been to some establishments that have video gaming, and I've seen them. There might be one or two people there using them, but nobody's waiting in line, nobody's trying to get there. It's going to be only certain people who are going to use it. And as far as the people in Downers Grove who don't know about the video gaming, they obviously don't video game. And if they don't know about it, there's not going to be all these bright lights flashing that it's going to be video gaming everywhere. So why would they even care? It's not ruining anything. So I think it's a positive thing for the businesses and for the village. And you're not going to have like 400 of them. You're going to have very limited, and it's going to be very wherever you agree to put them. And as far as I've heard things too about addiction, and in a perfect world, you wouldn't have addiction. But there's always a percentage there's going to be. I mean, people will drink. Not everybody's an addict, but some of them are. And it'll be the same with the video game. There'll be some people, a small percentage, who will probably become addicted to it. You just can't get away from it. But it's not going to be everywhere. And also, all the video gamers are going to be 21. They're old enough to make their own decisions. So younger people aren't going to be associated with it. So that's all I have to say, but I do agree with the video gaming for the residences, or I mean not for the residents, but the business establishments and the city, or the village, I mean. Thank you.
Thank you.
How are you? Denise McCann, resident of Downers Grove for 25 years. I'm absolutely in favor of video gaming, especially with the prescriptive draft ordinance that has been outlined here, 10 establishments and the rest. On a personal note, and forgive my tongue-in-cheek attitude, and Tom, I mean no disrespect, we have already lived through and encountered the detriment to our brand with the methadone clinic that's been in downtown, I think probably as long as I have. Somehow we escaped taking the brand away from Downers Grove, our livability and our quality of life with having that. Ogden, I raised boys here. They used to ask me what the Sybaris was. Somehow we avoided that, the brand detriment to Downers Grove by having the Sybaris. It wasn't a decisive thing. It didn't split the community. I could go on and on with, in my opinion, I lived on Highland Avenue. We had a girls' home across the street. Horrific neighborhood outcry. Troubled teens, 6 of them living in a home with 2 adults that watched them. Where's DEI? Where's Downers Grove? Our brand are our people. We are diverse, we promote equality, and we're inclusive. It's video gaming. It is not something that will take away, in my opinion, the brand, the quality of life, or the livability in Downers Grove. I urge you to put this to a vote within the council and pass it.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Bob Taft. I'm the owner of Q Pub and Grill over in Downers Grove, obviously. I've been here for 25 years. First, let me say, Mayor, I really appreciate what you guys are doing for the downtown area. It looks really like a great plan. I kind of read through it the other day. I think it's going to be really good for the community. I know I enjoy going to downtown myself, and I think it's going to be great for the businesses down there as well. I would like to say I lived in Downers Grove my whole life, Darien, Downers Grove, right in the surrounding communities. I grew up here, graduated from Downers Grove South, bought my first home in Downers Grove, first business in Downers Grove. Also raised my son, went to Downers Grove Christian School right next door here, and then graduated Downers Grove North. I love this community. I would never do anything to harm it or hurt it. I obviously have other locations in other towns. Every other location I have well over 10 years of experience with video gaming. Each of my locations has it. Downers Grove's the only one that does not. In my opinion, I see no negative impact in the businesses whatsoever. Truth of the matter is, you hardly even notice they're there. They kind of blend into the background. They do help the businesses, my businesses, compete with towns that offer it, because we're able to offer our employers higher wages of pay, our employees, higher wages of pay. We do bring in good tax revenue for the cities, and it is important, especially with what we went through with COVID. So I'm not going to get too detailed on anything else. I just want to say that I'd like the board to keep in mind, 30 years ago, Downers Grove was a dry town. The board back then voted to allow liquor in the downtown area. Well, I should say it was a dry downtown, I believe. They allowed liquor in the area. If that board wouldn't have voted to make a change that there was very vocal opposition to at the time, we would have never had the downtown area that we all enjoy today. We wouldn't be talking about the Main Street stuff without any restaurants and bars downtown. So the courage that that board had to make a change that, yes, some people spoke vocally about not wanting it, really did help improve the community. I think that we owe that board and mayor a big thank you for what they've helped build in Downers Grove. And, you know, just for, if that board wouldn't have voted that way, we wouldn't have the great restaurants, like I said, we wouldn't have the great downtown and the great events like Rich Calvani had spoke about earlier with the Downers Grove Historical Society History on Tap on November 9th, which I know I'm looking forward to attending myself. So thank you all very much for your consideration.
Thank you.
I'm Phil Cullen. I live on Middle Avenue. I've been there 30-some years, and I own Ballydoyle in Downers Grove and 6 other restaurants. And one of my restaurants is Gray's Mill Estate down in Montgomery. And 3 years ago, I opened that establishment. And 2 years ago, this month, we opened gaming down there. And you know, like a lot of people that were here tonight talking, you know, I saw gaming as, you know, you go into a truck stop, you see a bunch of people, kind of seedy people in the corner, gaming and gambling and all that kind of stuff. But once we put it in at Gray's Mill, I will tell you that, like the previous gentleman had talked about, you know, you don't really see it, you don't really notice it. And what it has become is, when I grew up, you know, we would sit and play Pong, and we would play all these video games. It's kind of like the video games of today that we used to have, you know, when we were younger. People just want to come in and have a couple of beers and be entertained. And if you look at the people that are gaming, they are their mothers, their fathers, their grandmothers, grandfathers. They're not all these seedy people. They're just normal people like all of us. And it's a form of entertainment. And I brought a couple of pictures to kind of show you guys what it looks like at the mill. But, you know, people just come in and they enjoy it. So I would encourage a couple of things. Number one, don't be afraid of gaming. It doesn't bring in the wrong kinds of people, and I can speak from experience. And you can talk to my GM. You can go down there and see Gray's Mill. It's very successful. And I would also want to say that you really, if you're going to allow it in Downers Grove, it has to be throughout Downers Grove. And, you know, like we had talked about before, we went through COVID. It's not been easy. But, you know, 2 weeks ago at Gray's Mill, I think we earned $800 on gaming alone. You know, for a small business in Downers Grove that had just went through 2 years of very difficult times, that's an important part of the income. So it would be very helpful for our businesses too. And listen, I'm a longtime resident. I plan to be here for a long time. And Downers Grove has been very good to us, and I appreciate that, but I encourage the council to vote positive for this, for the whole downtown. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Samantha Schroeder, resident of Downers Grove. To me, this whole issue of video gaming is a no-brainer. I would venture to say, just like the second gentleman mentioned, that the majority of Downers Grove residents are not even aware that this is on the table, and that the majority of them, of the Downers Grove residents, do not want video gaming in Downers Grove. As a local realtor of 15 years, it is my job to discuss curb appeal and property values every day. Do we want Downers Grove to be known as a place with video gaming? We would be enabling transients to stop off in our village to lose money. Does Downers Grove want to be known as a village who went for the cash grab off the backs of gamblers? This is why it is a no-brainer for me. Do we want our town to be more like other towns who have not allowed video gaming, Glen Ellen, Naperville, Oak Brook, and LaGrange, or more like towns with gaming, Westmont and Woodridge, etc.? We want to be the Oak Brook instead of the Oak Brook Terrace. Let's make the right decision, not only for our village, which has come such a long way, but also for property values, which will ultimately be affected.
Hello, my name's John Filer. I was born in Downers Grove, and my family just built a home here in Downers Grove. My family has also been associated with video gaming since the inception. We own a terminal operator and have since been acquired and merged with another company. I want to speak on video gaming and what it really is. Video gaming allows small businesses, which are the backbone of the community and this country, to really have a fair chance to compete with other communities. And also the revenue from video gaming allows them to hire more employees, to expand their businesses, to get out of debt, to put their kids through college, and et cetera, et cetera. Currently, I think Downers Grove made the right decision in 2009 to wait to see how video gaming was implemented. Now we are 11 years in with over 8,400 establishments live and 46,000 machines. Now there is no more fear of what video gaming is. We know what video gaming is. It's been a huge positive for the state, a huge positive for businesses, and a huge positive for the community. Over the last 12 months, video gaming has generated $965 million of tax revenue for the state, of which $140 million went to local municipalities. It is also, we believe that it's created roughly 35,000 jobs between manufacturers, distributors, terminal operators, and additional staff for establishments. So I'm hopeful that Downers Grove will make the right decision here and allow this restricted video gaming in the town, because we've seen it be very successful in other parts of the state. Thank you.
Thank you.
Chakusha had to leave. My name is Sue. I'm also at that same address. And I just want to support, just be upfront, I want to support video gaming. To me, the biggest thing is the small businesses. We've been in this area for 35 years. Downers has always been, whether it's downtown or on Ogden or whichever part of Downers, which is quite large, we love going to the small businesses. That's where you meet the owner, you meet other customers. To us, we'd rather go there on a Friday or Saturday night than any of the larger restaurants. And with the economy now, we tend to do that. We want to help them. Throughout COVID, the small businesses is who we try to keep alive because that's who we want to have survive. So as far as the brand, I've heard a lot of people talk about this. To me, having a diverse community where you have your downtown, a little bit more upscale, you still have all your small businesses. this is where I think families would be attracted. I would want to say Downers is a town that supports these small businesses. I just can't say it enough. The signage, these people or these small businesses want to work with you. They want to survive. I think I've heard some restrictions already exist for just general signage. Or don't have signage, but allow them to have it. I would not take it away from them just because of a signage issue. Make it something that looks respectable. Or don't even do it then. I mean, I think it's still nice for them, but if that's the big issue, don't allow that then. But allow them to have it. We go, again, small business in Westmont, Darien, so many places, Uncle Bub's in Darien, down at some of those places, Carriage Greens. It is, as this gentleman said, it's often just off to the side. Oftentimes it's not like this big hubbub. If people really want to get addicted to gambling and all of that, they're going to go to the boats. They're going to be going to the large places. To me, I'm not a video gamer, but I see people, and it does tend to be the mothers, the fathers, the grandfathers. I don't see this as, and I've been in even the area of Westmont and Darien longer. I've not seen the crime come into the area. I think the businesses we want to support, they're going to keep that same clientele, and it's just going to help them have a revenue stream. So I really, and the addiction, okay, my opinion, but I just think it's a moot point. If we're really going to get into addiction, then you do have to, as some people have said, ban all alcohol, tobacco sales, marijuana in the state, and everything else. So I don't think people at a video game machine is going to get addicted to gambling. They're going to get more addicted at the boats and the larger casinos. I just don't think it's going to happen here. I would worry more about alcohol and tobacco and everything else. I just think Downers is similar. It seems like we're trying to compare ourselves to Naperville and Glenelg and all of these. We're right here smack in the middle of Westmont, Darien, and nice communities. And they're not, I don't see them suffering. I see them trying to really support businesses. And my understanding is I think we've lost some small businesses because they couldn't survive and they went to surrounding areas that did allow it. So I understand, and it's everybody's opinions, but I just think we have to continue to support and keep it alive. So, thank you very much. I didn't address you, Mayor and Councilman, when I started.
It's fine, thank you.
Hi, good evening. I'm Slav Flinsky, 6930 Webster Street. First of all, I want to say thank you to the mayor and the council for your service and dedication. I'm sure you want to get back to your families right about now. This is obviously a very emotional topic for a lot of people. I understand some of the concerns from the residents as well as some of the perspectives from the business owners. What I'm really most concerned about is how some opinions of fear get spread, and I think we should stick with, facts and data. One thing I heard several times today is that if we bring video gaming in, that home values are going to drop. Is that necessarily so? One thing I do every month, because at the first of the month we have brand new real estate data that comes out, and I'm very concerned and interested in what's going on in Downers Grove and the surrounding community. And it just so happened that today I looked up home prices for Downers Grove since 2021, and for single-family homes, nice increase of 7%, which is great for Downers Grove residents. Now Westmont, that does have video gaming since 2021, you would think they would have dropped in their home values or home prices. Actually, they have increased by 14.5%. So, what's going to happen in the future, who knows? Over the last year and a half, I've been listening to a lot of experts about what home prices and interest rates are going to do, and they've all been wrong. So, but as of now, the data does not reflect that video gaming is going to bring down home values in the community. And I think we should really stay away from the fear mongering and stick to the facts. Me personally, I really don't care. I'm not a video gamer, but I think the village should really look into all aspects of what is good for the community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ian Ogden. I'm sure you guys know me. So I honestly don't have an opinion on whether I think it's a good thing or a bad thing. To be honest with you, because frankly my opinion has changed like about 5 times in this whole conversation. But I think that the most important thing is to just use discretion, make sure that whatever decision we're making is made with good thinking, good kind of like examining the situation from all sides. I think that it's very important to just not go in with guns a-blazing and saying, hey, let's do, just load it up, But I also think that when we're opening up to more like gambling type sort of things, I think you have to really pay attention to like gambling as an addiction. I'm not saying let's shut it all down for that reason, but I am saying let's at least be aware, kind of pay attention to those things so that if they do become an issue, we can address them. So I think that's important, like to keep that in mind as we go forward. But yeah, I think like everything in moderation, everything just as long as nobody's like making it like the new Vegas or the new kind of like gambling like center, gambling hub of Illinois, right? So that's all I had to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Joyce Economides, and I'm from 5206 Connor, and I've lived here for over 40 years. I think the thing that was shocking for me about this whole thing, I was one of those people that didn't know anything about it, except that on Saturday night, we were returning from an event out farther western suburbs. And as we approached the Belmont-Maple intersection, we saw colored blinding lights ahead. Like they were like LED lights on steroids, or driving into a brilliant sunset where you can't see. I had another analogy also. But coming through the intersection, we realized it was coming from Angelo's Market on the northeast corner, and saw the gaming signs as we passed by. In the past, we've seen the paper poster signs for meats and strips on the end regarding slots. So we were aware that they did have gaming there, but that glare reached as far as it did from a right angle coming across the intersection, to me was really shocking. It was strange. And it was then the next day that I noticed people talking on Nextdoor about it. And so I was very much, very much impacted by the experience we'd had the night before and how much that affected that neighborhood. There's something I'll say a little later on, but in further looking into some things, one of the things is that those signs that now are there, all the paper is off. This is clear glass with these signs, and they're glaring. I don't know if they're fluorescent, or a new kind of fluorescent, or if they're just LED. I don't know what they're made of. But I look at this, number one, partly as a hazard in terms of if to handle these machines that they are required, as I've heard in some looking into things. If that's so, that they require you to use their signage, that to me is a definite no for our community. I look at, number one, like I said, a hazard. You're driving down the road and it's raining, or you have anything that even now causes, refraction in light is going to cause a problem. So that's one thing that really concerns me. I think also in areas, if you've got them closer to residential areas, they can become a public nuisance. There actually happens to be a fairly new townhouse community right across the street. And I realized, I'm sure that was built because now they just put these lights on over this last weekend. And I can't imagine waking up and, or looking out my window and seeing this. Regarding the image of Downers Grove, I never thought of it as a brand. I just thought of it as a family town. That it was more normal. It wasn't so upbeat as to be snobby. It also wasn't so, poor people. It wasn't just people struggling. It was just everyday people. And I've loved that about living in Downers Grove. But the first time that all came to my mind was several years ago when Downers put through a sign ordinance, and if you remember anybody that was still around here back then, there were signs all over Ogden Avenue. That's where you really noticed it. But the tall signs, the short signs, some were advertising. Some of them were just the name of the establishment. And the ordinance was passed that regulated the height and I believe the placement. I'm not sure everything that was involved, but I do know height was involved. And so, yeah, gave it a little more refined look and not so slap hazard. But these video game lights fit the image more to me like the little Nevada towns that we drove through when I was a kid, where it's just the streets look like a carnival all the time. They don't look good. They don't look healthy. Let's put it that way. So it kind of brought that memory to mind. Or carnival. It's in the middle of town, or in an old movie, the Potterville picture, that type of thing. That's it. It brought that image to my mind. And so one of the things to me really concerns me if the gaming companies are requiring you to use certain types of signage as part of putting those games into your establishment, what is that going to look like? Thirdly, if these video games places are out of place in the downtown area regarding damaging our image, then why are they not out of place throughout the village? This looks to me like not in my backyard. And to make an analogy for that, my parents lived out in another state, in a county where some of the commissioners in the county wanted to put in a hazardous waste dump because it would bring a lot of money into the area to do that. And they decided they wanted to put it down in the particular part, the area, the half, that was where my parents lived. Not that it wasn't like it was in their backyard or anything like that. But the interesting thing about it, it was prime rural farmland. And the area that they were not even suggesting was actually much more conducive to put it there. Turned out that the commissioners lived in the other area and they did not want it in their backyard. And you can imagine the anger and you don't want it in your backyard, yet it's okay for it to have it in my backyard, that idea. And that's kind of how I feel too part about this. It's like, if it's good enough to be in Downers Grove, then why is it not good enough to be in downtown? Why is it putting it in certain places and choosing and picking and choosing where these places will be? I just think it's a type of segregation to do that. And today,
Hey, Joyce.
I went on a discovery.
Hey, Joyce.
How much more do I have?
You're over, so
Okay.
wrap up.
Yeah, I'm almost done. Today I went on a discovery journey. No nighttime blinding, but I was driving all over on the major roads, all the major north-south and the east-west. And I also stopped and went into Angelo's, even though I know it's not part of, I found out it's not part of Downers Grove. And you need to go see for yourself. The primary purpose is no longer the groceries meat market. The primary purpose is the gaming, and they're working on building up more space for that. And so but at the same time, I was looking on purpose at Las Palmas and Zaslows, who have gaming, and they really had very little of anything, if anything at all, that showed on the outside. So I thought it was just an interesting contrast. And but if you're going to limit lighting by another ordinance, I think you're going to have to go and look for yourself to see what's tastefully out there because of all the small businesses that have open signs that are electric or a couple of little things. That it's going to be, we don't want to harm other people in order to prevent something in terms of ordinance for lighting. And the last thing is to follow the money. It's obviously important to the businesses that want the money. That's where the real money advantage is. I would hope that there would not be any other reason for the village to become a part of this. From what I've heard, the amount of tax abatement that would happen for us as residents would not be that much. So that's, I think, my other part is it's good to support small businesses, but do I want those that next door to me in my backyard? And I have to honestly tell you, with those lights, I don't. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is David Marock. I have lived in Downers here for 66 years. I saw the plans that staff pulled up regarding gaming, and I thought it was well thought out. I don't see any problems with it whatsoever. I think it's discreet, and I think you should support it. And the money that we'll probably take in for the village, probably in excess of $200,000, why not take the money and give us leaf pickup and brush pickup? Thank you.
Thank you.
Janet Winningham, and longtime resident of Downers Grove, and I will be brief because you all know that I strongly oppose video gaming, and the reasons I've provided, and I agree with many of the people here who have made comment. You're starting out with 10 licenses. Well, I respect the restaurant owners who are here, and I assume that they're going to be getting those licenses, but what if not? What if they don't? Is there going to be a whole line of people whining because somebody got one of the 10 and they didn't? It is a slippery slope, and if it does not enhance the value of anybody's property except the particular vendors and their operations, it is a detriment, I think, to the village and the brand and the brand is as good a word as any, but there's an ambiance here that we strive to maintain as and the word upscale is perfectly fine. I liked that word too. But most people, I would think, I agree, generally don't know that this is on the boards, and it is not something that's going to help the town as much as it will harm it. And it won't stay outside of the downtown area. We've heard people say, why not everywhere? As soon as if it becomes effective, then you'll be getting complaints because the Tivoli can have it, but we can't. It's just a slippery slope, and I'm against it. Thank you.
Good evening, folks. I will try and keep this brief, as I know this has been a very long meeting. I recognize that this is going to be a lengthy process with a lot of debate. I could spend my entire 5 minutes, as I've done in the past. I could refute the misrepresentations, the lack of facts, and the feelings and perceptions, and so forth and so on, point by point by point by point. However, in the interest of brevity, I am not going to do that tonight. I've done it many times. You all really do know the facts at this point. I do want to go on record as supporting video gaming. I also want to go on the record that video gaming will help support small businesses in Downers Grove. For years now, retail businesses have been struggling because of the ability of consumers to shop online. One of the few things you can't do online is go out with friends, socialize, eat a cheeseburger, have a few beers. That can only be done in a brick and mortar establishment. As more and more retail stores continue to close, the reality is that taverns and restaurants have become the lifeblood for revenue in small communities like Downers Grove. But thanks to the challenges of maintaining a staff and rising cost of food and beverages, it is becoming increasingly difficult for establishments like Brian's American Grill to stay open and profitable, especially when faced with the prospects of competing with taverns and restaurants that are allowed to offer gaming in close proximities to Brian's American Grill. The revenue from video gaming will help all of us recover from the pandemic, offset increasing costs, and allow us to compete on a level playing field with these surrounding communities. Video gaming means we can pay our employees more, prevent them from leaving and going to work at restaurants that offer gaming in surrounding communities. And we can avoid increasing our prices, which hurts young Downers Grove families that are also struggling with a weak and unpredictable economy. Video gaming is a win win, win. It's a win for the employees, it's a win for the customers, and it's a win for the Downers Grove tax coffers. I respectfully ask you to help our small businesses survive. Support video gaming. Please pass this ordinance. Thank you for your time.
Others? Okay, we are going to take about a 5-minute break just to stretch our legs, get a drink, make a pit stop if it's needed, and then we will be right back here, so everybody just hang tight. All right, we had a little pause in conversation from the audience, and so we're going to go to our council conversation, and we're going to talk amongst ourselves a little bit, and you'll hear from each one of us, I'm sure, at some point as we talk about this proposed ordinance. So with that, does anybody want to start? Danny.
Thank you, Mayor. While I understand and appreciate all the feedback from both sides, both those in favor and opposed of basically lifting the ban on gaming establishments, my support of this draft ordinance remains unchanged. I too love Downers Grove for all the same reasons as all of you, and I would go to battle against anyone who says it's not the most vibrant, quaint, charming, safe, beautiful, family-oriented, all these words that have been used in all these emails, community with the best schools around. We all agree on that. And I understand based on what's been circulated and you may have experienced elsewhere as to why you may believe those values are hanging in the balance. I'm confident that Downers Grove will remain all of this and more. I believe that our staff has formed a better draft ordinance than I could have even imagined. And although there are things that I might want to tweak, I think surrounding communities, those that were mentioned probably here tonight, will look to us and emulate this ordinance in the very near future. Video gaming is an income generation that that the state of Illinois has made available for Illinois food and beverage establishments across the state, including establishments as close as 300 yards away at the Moose, on Fairview and 63rd, less than 2 miles away, on Belmont and Maple, less than 2 miles away, and Ogden and Washington, less than 2 miles away. Based on the proposed ordinance, outside of the Tivoli, the closest establishment believed to now offer gaming would be 1.5 miles away at Bernard and Ogden, 2.5 miles away at Woodward and Ogden, and 63rd and Belmont, 3 miles from where we're sitting here today. All of those further than 8 that already are in existence. When competing with an establishment with similar offerings and atmosphere, Downers Grove businesses are at a severe disadvantage for the sole reason of being located in Downers Grove. The most crucial disadvantage mentioned here tonight is the ability to attract and retain talent. I won't assume the income for specific businesses, but the numbers are publicly available on the Illinois Gaming Board website, and direct competitors in neighboring communities have and continue to produce upwards of $250,000 of additional revenue, which can and has been used to invest back into their businesses and employee retention. With the workforce in this space dwindling, I do believe Downers Grove establishments should have the ability to offer competitive wages that others are able to. Not only is this beneficial for the business, but also it's beneficial for their employees who can now afford to live in the town in which they work. From a social and moral perspective, the perception of wagering as an immoral activity may have been accepted 15, 20 years ago, but just like tattoos and bars that were once thought of trashy, wagering is now the social norm. Any sporting event on television, social gatherings, and at sports bars is influenced by wagering activity, and those who partake in it believe that it greatly increases the value of the entertainment by providing a heightened level of excitement. Residents of Downers Grove are gambling for entertainment by choice. They're doing it whether it's a few blocks away, on their phones, online, or as mentioned earlier, at the 4 establishments currently operating that are closer to where we are sitting right now than the 8 of the 10 potentially eligible businesses, it's already here. As far as the type of client gaming attracts, I think it's been mentioned a few times, it itself does not bring in riffraff or trash, like has been said. I've spoken to officials in neighboring communities, and none have reported additional crime, or incidents for that matter, and no need for additional patrols or security. Gaming attracts clients like me and you, and while I don't personally gamble, I have been out with friends and will absolutely have partaken without judgment from me or anybody else. So that takes us to the appearance of our community that everyone's worried about. I can agree that there are some bad apples out there putting up gaudy signs. And while I know we cannot constitutionally control what is advertised on the signs, these are not just for gaming. I think somebody mentioned Angelo's earlier tonight. While it's not part of Downers Grove, but I drove by there today and there's banners up right now for big feather signs that say market, liquor, and under new management that are just as gaudy as the signs that say slots. These signs are actually prohibited in Downers Grove. Many business owners are putting them up on weekends when they know it isn't being enforced. I would suggest that we increase our efforts to enforce the current code at all times, including responding to a violation reported by a resident via the Village's CRC app. Furthermore, make the code more stringent towards these types of attention-getting devices. I would strongly suggest that after an initial warning is given, that any infraction is penalized at the highest possible fine, of which I believe is $750. And after that happens, I don't think somebody's going to make that mistake twice. Additionally, it was mentioned off the record by one of my colleagues, and I would welcome the idea of finding other ways of keeping building owners and business owners accountable for the aesthetic appearance of their building with the added revenue gain. Again, I cannot be more impressed with the way that the draft ordinance was written by staff, thoughtfully finding a way to capture the concerns expressed and parameters we requested. There's not going to be parlors like people are taking pictures of and posting online. The way we're limiting this is by limiting the footprint of the area and the percentage of gaming revenue to 25% of the gross. It's also going to have separate rooms that aren't visible or heard from the street or outside the gaming room. And downtown, most importantly to many, even those that are in favor of gaming, we were able to find a way to limit it out of the downtown by creating new liquor classifications. The only thing that I would like to see changed within the draft ordinance is the limit of 10 licenses. While I can only count to 12 or so based on my assumptions, I don't see the benefit. As some people mentioned, we will likely get requests to extend this as soon as the 9 remaining are taken away, seeing as the Moose already has 1. In regard to a vote or the majority of people in Downers Grove not being in favor of this, I find that very hard to believe. Everyone elected in the past 2 cycles that's up here right now promised the residents to be in favor of gaming, with the exception of the mayor, which he's awesome for other things. So
Nice save.
So the people, the residents have spoken with their votes. If we want to open the discussion on the use of the revenue, I would suggest applying it towards the one fund that we are aware of that will undoubtedly require it and continue to smooth the effects of the public safety fund, a pension fund. That's all I can.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump in?
Sure.
Martin?
And let me just start by recognizing there's a fair amount of tension over this issue, as we've heard both online and in this room tonight. And it just reminds me of a great definition of the difference between debate and dialogue. Dialogue is collaborative, 2 or more sides working together towards a common understanding. Debate is oppositional, 2 sides oppose each other and attempt to prove each other wrong. And I say that because I prefer dialogue to try to reach consensus than debate to try to prove that one person is right and the other person is wrong. But is there an and solution? And as my colleagues know, but I'll share this again because I've been listening and reading, like we all have. Thank you for your cards and messages and emails, and the people who have taken time out of their lives to be here and talk to us on this issue. This is truly engaging with your government, so it's a good thing because this is about Downers Grove. But one of the things that I've been asked quite a bit is, well, why? Why is this coming up? And it's pretty simple. Did the village put on its long list of things, we got to go find another revenue source and let's look at gaming? No. That's a misconception. We didn't do that. The short answer is for some time now, there have been small businesses, patrons of those small businesses, and residents of Downers Grove, and the Chamber of Commerce that represents all the businesses in Downers Grove, has been asking for this council and prior councils to consider this issue. So when the question is, well, why is this coming up? This is a money grab. No, it's not. We've been asked by residents, we've been asked by small businesses, we've been asked by the Chamber of Commerce to put this forward. And in the past, for whatever reason, it didn't get any headway. It got some headway a couple of years ago, but ultimately didn't come to a vote. And so the question was asked again prior to the last election. Hi, we're small businesses, we're residents, we're patrons, and we're the Chamber of Commerce. We would like this to be considered again. That's why. And I know that there's also a very passionate, well-spoken contingency of our community that is just against it, period. I understand that. So the challenge that I took up, and nobody asked me to take it up, I just took it up, was is there a way that we can help our small businesses? We can listen to our business community. We can listen to the patrons of our business community. We can listen to our fellow residents that are in favor of it, understanding that there are neighbors who are not. And is there some sort of an and solution? Is there a way to do this that would help those who asked for it and yet ameliorate the objections that we have heard, signage, where it would be, different issues like that? And it struck me that we've done this before. Case in point, food trucks. Many years ago, a small business in town called Alter Brewing, not so small anymore, said it would really be helpful to our business if the village were to allow food trucks, which we did not permit. And there was opposition to it. A fair amount of opposition to it. But through some efforts and where would it be? Well, we don't want to have it downtown. Okay, well, can we do it in certain other zone places? This, that, and otherwise. And ultimately we came to a solution that was able to help a small business and later more small businesses with something they asked for in the face of considerable opposition by coming up with a consensus solution. And we did that. And then food truck ordinance was expanded after that. And so when people ask me, well, how can you have things in some places and other places? We do it all the time. All the time. This is not new. And the food trucks is the obvious example because food trucks are not allowed downtown. But they are allowed in other places, and they have proved very helpful to small businesses. And there's a lot of support in the community. I'm sure some people don't like them, but it's turned out to be okay, and Downers Grove did not implode as a consequence. So the why here is, is there a way to navigate the concerns and yet still help those who have asked for it? Because we do a lot of economic development talk, and it's about not just attracting businesses, but about retaining businesses. And oftentimes we have people come up here and ask for incentive agreements and other things, which is designed to keep a business from moving to another town because they can get a better deal somewhere else. I'm being very generic when I say that, and there we actually are trying to preserve revenue, much larger amounts of revenue. But it strikes me that we also ought to try to retain our small businesses. And one of the things that I'm struck with is hearing, well, if they're failing, it's because they have a poor business model. I don't buy that. What I think is that, and what they're really saying is that I can't compete with somebody who has the same exact business model in the next town over because they have a different environment that allows them to succeed better. So to me, it's about how can we possibly help our small businesses in a way that addresses a lot of the concerns that have been raised. They're fair concerns. And yet do a little bit of retention, which we're very proud of in the EDC world, for some smaller businesses. I think that's important to try. So that's the why now. The other question is, why is this coming up now? Well, because people asked for it and because there wasn't a definitive decision a couple of years ago. So that's why it's back. And I know some people are appalled that it's back, but I mean, it was never really definitively resolved in the first place. So we have this conflict. People are adamantly against it, and we have small businesses, residents, and the Chamber of Commerce and other people like the Tivoli and other iconic members of our community asking for this to be a possibility for them. Is there a way to do it? And I will echo what Commissioner Glover said in terms of, and this has always been my experience, is our staff is amazing at coming up with these impossible solutions. And this was really a well thought out, very limited attempt to try to accomplish both things, which is avoid as many of the problems, not all, you're not perfect, sorry, avoid many of the problems, and yet still provide a vehicle by which we can support small businesses and the residents that are asking for this. And I like that approach because it is more of consensus at the end of dialogue. How do we address some of the concerns that we have? Well, number one, let's start small. So we did with food trucks. We didn't have food trucks everywhere. It was pretty small. Let's see how it pans out. Is it really going to be the boogeyman that we think? And it turned out it wasn't. So very limited. I think 10, and with all due respect to Mr. Glover, I would stick to 10. I think starting small, getting some experience, and if things turn out not the way we think, I mean, we can't eliminate them. There's no obligation to keep this in place, but I think it's helpful to try to assist our small businesses in a measured way. We're limiting the location of where they can be. There was big uproar about not in downtown. Okay, sounds just like the food truck debate from years ago. Fine, we can do that. There's a way to do that defensively. All sorts of constrictions that Commissioner Glover already mentioned with respect to where it is in the building, how much space it can have, the size, access. I assume we're going to enforce this just like we do anything else in a liquor license, which means people going in and checking on the owners, just like they do with other liquor license holders. Signage was a big concern, and candidly, our sign ordinance does not permit what's at Angelo's without going into more detail. So there have been a number of misconceptions about what this will look like. The ordinance actually is to the contrary. It's very limited, it's very measured, it's very controlled, and I think it's responsible for a solution that tries to accomplish the goal of helping our small businesses, accommodating our residents who've asked for it, our business community, and yet doing as best it possibly can to try to avoid and minimize the concerns that have been raised. So it's not going to be downtown, great. It will help our small businesses. And oh, by the way, one of the things we often do when we're doing attraction and retention to keep businesses in town, it usually costs us money to do that. We usually have to come up with some kind of a subsidy plan, or we have to do something. This is one of those few examples where we can do some retention and it actually generates money. Not a lot. Again, it's not about the revenue for the village, but you know, what's that old saying? 100,000 here, 100,000 there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. I mean, it does actually generate some revenue, but the main purpose is it's a way to help small businesses without costing us money. It actually raises money. So I talked about signage. I talked about the limited at the beginning. Injurious to our image. I've heard a lot about that. This is going to be injurious to the image of Downers Grove or the brand of Downers Grove. And I just have to say, because I have to get off my chest, is that Mayor Barnett knows this very well, that some of us have spent decades building the brand of Downers Grove. So we know very well what the brand is because we helped build it. I went to high school here. I can tell you what it looked like back in the 80s. And we spent a lot of time building this downtown that I've heard a lot of people talk about how wonderful it is. It wasn't here. And there were a lot of things that led into that. So for example, I remember when the first Sidewalk Cafe was requested by a small business in town. There was opposition up here because how are we going to control liquor sales at a Sidewalk Cafe? Somebody will hand a glass of $12 wine over to a minor. We can't have that. Well, now we have Sidewalk Cafes everywhere and people love it. There was a time when we did not allow a business to have the word tavern or bar in its name. Anyone been to Pierce Tavern or Bar Cheeto lately? Town did not fall apart. There was a small business that wanted to get a start here in Downers Grove called Orange and Brew. We didn't have licenses for bottle shops because, I mean, goodness, I would be selling alcohol without any food on site. Small business, want to have an opportunity, very successful business, a family business with alcohol. And that's the main focus of the business, it's alcohol. Breweries, oh my goodness, breweries in Downers Grove. There was some concern about having breweries. Now we have multiple breweries in Downers Grove. Also very family oriented. When their singular focus is on alcohol, which someone could push back on and say isn't okay. Gambling, I won't repeat what Commissioner Glover said, but yes, I mean, I would almost wager, no pun intended, that some of you have DraftKings or some other sport bet on your phone right now. And last time I went into Jewel, there's a big lottery machine right there where anybody can go buy lottery tickets and gamble right when you buy groceries. So I don't believe it's going to impact our brand at all. In fact, I think most of the people that maybe not be aware of this happening, if it passes a year from now, still won't be aware of it because it's just not going to be that kind of an impact. And I say that not because I'm speculating, I'm saying that because I've seen it with these other things actually happen, where there was a lot of concern and it didn't happen. And I can go on and on with examples. So I think this is a great solution, and had we not been able to come up with a solution, I may not have been in favor. But I think this is a very well thought out, very limited way to do both good to our community in a way that minimizes the impact and some of the concerns have been raised. I realize that people can have different opinions on that. That's just my opinion. The last thing I'll say is, the question was raised, why don't we put this out to a referendum? I mean, just candidly, we don't govern by referendum. We don't. You can count on one hand how many referendums we've had in Downers Grove, and any that were like this, it's just not the way we govern. And I don't think that that's the way we ought to govern on this either. There's a lot of very, very important issues that have been split votes that did not go to referendum. So I'll stop there. I do have some questions that I didn't think of earlier about the ordinance. For example, one question I have real quickly is, if an entity that was an REC right now, I'm sorry, if an entity that was an R right now wanted to become an REC, what would they have to do? They would have to reapply all over again to get the new license?
I'm sorry, RDC?
Yeah, sorry, I'm using the wrong term. I'm looking at this page.
If they are currently an R license and they automatically, if they're within the downtown boundaries, automatically convert to a DT.
I don't think
Is that what you're asking?
I don't think
That's not
that's
the
the question.
question.
If they're existing R and they want to become an
Existing
REC, does it require a new, fresh application?
They want to become an REC.
Yes, they would have to reapply and they would have to meet the definition of a recreational license. Those parameters.
Okay. And then I'll just go back to my question about enforcement. Are we contemplating that enforcement would be, so right now we do controlled buys for liquor license owners, do that all the time. It's part of our liquor enforcement. This is a new element. This is something that as a liquor license holder would have to comply with the gaming rules. I know there's other enforcement mechanisms probably for gaming, but are we planning on doing any additional enforcement in conjunction with?
We would enforce our ordinance and our regulations in our ordinance. We would not enforce the video gaming that's controlled by the state.
That would be totally within the state's purview.
Yes, but we would be able to control the regulations that we impose through ordinance.
Okay. And enforce them accordingly.
Exactly.
Okay. Those are the only questions I had at this time. So again, I appreciate that there's a lot of different views on this. There are different views up here. There are different views out there. But I think this is a pretty darn good, discreet way of trying to achieve both things. And I'm willing to try it. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Others? Leslie?
Yep. I am going to generally agree with Commissioners Glover and Tully. I wanted to reflect on a lot of the concerns that we have been having from the community, whether it be through email or conversations or here, so bear with me. The biggest, I would say, concerns that we have are that we can really kind of control our addiction and losing our family-friendly town. One of the reasons, as kind of was discussed by other commissioners, that we are not proposing video gaming in downtown is it just happens to be a sticking point with residents. And that goes back to what Commissioner Tully said about really trying to have some sort of a compromise within this. And so if that is something that, we got a lot of emails of people just saying, please don't put it in downtown. So, this is kind of one of those areas of compromise in which I think there's value in that. In terms of family-friendly, as a parent of a second grader, it's a highly subjective notion. As I've mentioned before, and I'm pretty sure that these business owners are going to hate me, I find having not one, but two humidors in our downtown to be the opposite of family-friendly. Smoking is highly addictive, and secondhand smoke has extremely deleterious effects on one's health. But yet we seem to accept those without question. It's hard for me to see how the arguments against gaming are not based on perceived class differences. Historically, cigars are enjoyed by more wealthy individuals. That form of entertainment is more common in those kinds of circles, and yet video gaming, which often is presented as perhaps a lower class, is kind of attacked in a different way. And I do have concerns with sometimes some of the language that is used with folks who do enjoy video gaming. The way that we have presented this ordinance would not be visible to the general public. You wouldn't be able to hear it, and it wouldn't be in our downtown. So already we're kind of making some improvements on that family-friendly, mission. There are myriad anecdotes and discussions that we can have about gambling addictions and how it impacts lives. And those are not for naught. Gambling addictions are a real thing. They are physiological, much like addictions to opioids, alcohol, nicotine, and those should not be necessarily minimized. So I do empathize with those concerns. I'm sure that every single one of us here has been touched by addiction in some way. I, for one, lost my father at age 10 to a heart attack as a result of decades of smoking. One of the reasons why I'm so against smoking. Nicotine addiction can ruin a family in an instant. As I know now as an adult, we almost lost our home, resulted in me needing to take out student loans to attend college, and obviously altered our life forever. My father's parents passed away shortly after, and again, I lost an uncle to alcohol addiction. I have no idea what happened to him. After all of that, he disappeared. We've tried to find him, and we have no idea. Despite all of this, I'm not suggesting that we remove humidors or establishments that serve alcohol from our downtown. So I'm trying to get across that I can empathize and understand people who have concerns with addiction and the potential for gambling addiction. I see that. But one of the reasons why we want to put this behind closed doors is so that maybe not being able to see it will not trigger as much in somebody's brain for an addiction as something that is bright and flashy. I think it is an important compromise that we carefully regulate them, that we have these additional supports that our staff are suggesting. And I would say any revenue we potentially use should go towards our social services. Because if we want to have a real discussion about addiction, I'm all for it. Let's address the root causes. High cost of living, low wages, health care attached to employment, lack of behavioral health services, stigma around those with mental disorders, and addiction, the list goes on. We've tried to address some of those issues. We have hired a social worker, and I'm incredibly proud of that success. And we've done some things, like I have suggested perhaps we look into affordable housing without some success. But I think it's important that we as a community, regardless of if we move forward with this or not, should reduce the stigma, talk about how addiction is not a moral failing. It's a result of genetics, potential trauma, and lack of mental health supports. That people who struggle with addictions are not bad people, but just people who may need help and have had a lot happen up until that point. We can talk about how any one of us could fall into an addiction or love someone who has. So let's beef up our social services using those potential funds and put money towards prevention and treatment programs that have evidence behind them. But I'm uncomfortable using those arguments as an attempt to judge those who just use video gaming as a form of entertainment just because we don't understand it. And honestly, I don't understand it because I'm not a gambler. I imagine that many of us in this room, as has been mentioned, have done fantasy football and baseball leagues. We've had betting squares, poker games in people's basements, FanDuels, online betting services. And my question is, why is that more socially acceptable to have betting at your fingertips than at least in a setting where perhaps you could have a social interaction with other folks? In some ways, it might also lead to some good relationships where maybe somebody's addiction could be identified as well. You know, we've heard words like sleazy being thrown around with this, and I want to remind you that we may have neighbors who partake in this, and to maybe think about the words that we are choosing. You know, I'm sure that there are going to be plenty of businesses in Downers Grove who figure this is not part of their business model, and that's great. There are others who have billiards, darts, and other things that find it may fit in with their suite of entertainment. And I'm not looking to ban a legal venture that our staff has taken great lengths to regulate. I think there are more people out there who do enjoy this, people like my grandparents-in-law, who find traveling more difficult as they get older and just kind of want a little bit of entertainment on a date night. And as of now, we are not offering that right to our business owners and patrons. So if we say we want to remain family-friendly, we can, but just as several have said, we should start talking about vape shops, humidors, breweries, liquor stores. It would be a larger conversation. But I think that this issue really does revolve a lot around the fear of the unknown, which I get, and I understand that. But I also do have some trust that this council, staff, businesses, and the community alike can find a way to allow this in a safe and family-friendly way. As many have mentioned, we have it at the Moose, and so far I have not heard any negative effects. As for the technical aspects of this, most of the residents' concerns that we have heard so far, including much of the concern we've heard tonight, is addressed by the ordinance. I fully support the idea of this being in a separate room, not visible from the outside of the establishment or in the main dining area of the establishment. I support making it a small proportion as designated in the ordinance, 200 square feet or 25% of the square footage, whichever is smaller, as well as limiting the number of machines in a given location. I would be supportive of limiting it to even 4 rather than 6, because we do have some suggestions that, you know, there can be tracking devices that can be put on these so that folks can only spend a certain amount of money. I would be really interested in looking forward and looking at that. And this way, with the fewer machines, you have less likelihood of anybody going too far in one sitting. Finally, obviously, sign ordinance. We've heard this from multiple commissioners. We would absolutely be enforcing that sign ordinance. As Commissioner Tully already made the comment, that would be something that we as a village would be able to regulate. And finally, if this does pass, I'd actually like to see staff work with the DuPage Mayors and Managers Conference and the Metropolitan Mayors Caucus to potentially work with the state legislature to increase the profits that the state and municipalities receive to be more in line with what we see in other states. We're actually the lowest of pretty much any of the states that allow this, and we haven't really looked at that in a long time. It's only 30% goes back to the state and the municipality, and in other states it's upwards of 70 to 73. So if this does move forward, I would like to see this benefit the community itself more rather than perhaps the operators, to know that that money is going back into some of these services. But obviously that is something that would potentially be down the road if this passes. So I think a lot of what was put in this ordinance was in the spirit of compromise. I'm willing to look even further, like I said, with regard to the number of machines in any given establishment, and am definitely comfortable starting with that 10, as Commissioner Tully said. I think that it's really important that we start at that level because there is a lot of fear and concern around some of these issues. So I think it's important that we start small just to help potentially bring the community along with us as we work through a compromise. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Others? Mike, go ahead.
Sure. So just one point of clarification. Based on what I'm seeing here, eligible establishments as of 9/1/2023, there'd be something around 40.
Correct. There's about 38.
So I just, 38. So, there was a comment made earlier about possibly hundreds or what that sort of thing. So I just bringing that into perspective and getting the fact out on that. I thank commissioners that have spoken already for hitting all of the high points. I've been asked why I would possibly want to allow video gaming. The state has already determined there are good reasons to allow video gaming. And the correct question to us is, why should we vote to opt out? Why should we choose to forbid an opportunity afforded nearly all the residents of this great state? Before us now is what I believe to be the most restrictive video gaming ordinance in Illinois. It limits the quantity of licenses, the number of devices per establishment, where in town they're allowed, and their concealment within the establishment. We're in effect, as others have kind of alluded to, slow rolling this issue, so we can be sure we're doing it in the Downers Grove way. I have not heard any new information that compels me to vote for opting out. Quite the opposite, in fact. And while there may be many residents, and clearly there are, and I thank you for your cards and letters as well, and in fact, maybe just take a moment to say how much I appreciate the civility, because that's not always been my experience in my prior service on another board. So really appreciate how people have been passionate, but yet civil, in how they've shared their opinions. So, you know, there are clearly a lot of people who may not be in favor of this, but, you know, there were thousands of people who elected me just 5 months ago. And I made it very clear then that I support video gaming, except in our downtown area. And I intend to keep my promise. And that's all I have to say on that, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Mike? Bruce, you want to go?
Sure. Let me just start by saying that the main reason that I do not support this is that the vast majority of our community has communicated that they don't want it. We can talk about emails from one side and emails from the other. It's been overwhelmingly against this from our residents. The last time around, on the former council, we got a lot of email from one side against it and emails that were for it. So once we tabled it, giving us time to take a look at this further, I went through each email to verify were there residents, who they were. I could tell you most against gaming, the vast majority were residents. On the other side, it was a mix. It was restaurant owners, it was members of the Chamber of Commerce, some out of town, many out of town who were blatantly putting that they were out of town. There's a false equivalency that there was a balance, that there's two sides, some asking, some for not. There's no way to refute the fact that the vast majority, especially this time around, of the feedback we have all received as a council are residents who just simply do not want this in town. I've had conversations with a number of you regarding feedback we receive, and some of you have expressed that you will never be swayed by emails. And I am fully aware that we're elected to make decisions, but we also have a responsibility to make those decisions based on what we think reflects the community's sentiments and the vision of our village. If the fact, and it is a fact, that the overwhelming feedback is against this, is not even in your consideration set, it's my opinion that we are discounting then, or you are discounting then, the value of your constituents for reasons I've yet to understand. Let's be clear, this is not about revenue to our village. It's not a windfall that many are portraying it to be. The vast majority of revenue comes from gaming cafes, and I appreciate the compliments to the staff on this restrictive ordinance. I would like to think, since it's not that far off from what we discussed last time, and I was in a position to look for a compromise then, I'm not now, many of those things came from our discussion. But the vast majority of the revenue that comes from these machines comes from cafes, and I haven't heard any of you talk about wanting cafes in town. This will create no jobs. All this requires is a bartender with a line of sight to the room. And since tabling, I took a look at the state data, which is publicly available, that provides the local municipality revenue of each town and establishment. And the municipality revenue per these restaurants seems to be dropping. For example, in Westmont, restaurant-based gaming. Now, I'm pulling that out from cafes. They have cafes. There's no doubt they're driving a lot of revenue. But with the restaurants that have this, they generated $155,000 in local tax in 2022. In 2019, it was 125. So in 22, it was about 30 grand more. But in 2019, there were only 45 machines. In 2022, there are now 70. So what we're seeing is a decrease in revenue per terminal by almost 20%. There's a similar trend when you look at the first half of this year against Westmont's first half of last year. We're seeing a 15% revenue down from there. This is a clear indication that the numbers are going down and the revenue is going to be far lower than what we expect it to be. If we're really looking for the extra $250,000 in revenue, which would hardly register on our overall revenue reports, we could simply raise the food and beverage tax from 1.5% to 1.6%. Completely inconsequential amount that would generate the same amount of tax revenue from our constituents without gaming. What I thought was also interesting was at the top of the staff report, every report we get, they list out what the strategic goal it achieves for us. They align our ordinances with that strategic goal. The fact that staff didn't even feel compelled to align this ordinance with the strategic goal of strong economic development is proof enough to me this is not about revenue. The windfall here is for the terminal operators and a handful of restaurant owners, and that is it. Aside from the lack of revenue, let's talk about the hidden cost of convenience gambling, which is a term used to delineate from casino gambling, which I'll get to in a moment. One of the costs not discussed here is the additional burden on staff to manage gaming licenses and licensors. And with all of us discussing a sizable priority action list that we've slated, this seems like a poor use of our staff's time, a staff that I'll remind you has been diminished in the last 10 years by over 70 people. Also, we need additional resources by law enforcement to enforce these regulations. With all the restrictions that we intend to add, including, we need to include the enforcement time. More cost, more time spent for what purpose? Is this what we want our law enforcement people to be working on? I don't think so. And here's something no one is talking about, but should be clearly understood. Convenience gambling has taken revenues away from our schools, more than $200 million in the last 10 years, because casino revenue has dropped by that much due to the proliferation of video gaming and, of course, sports betting on the phone. Taxes from casino revenues can be up to 50%, and that money goes into the Education Assistance Fund, which provides large grants for elementary schools, high schools, and our state universities. By allowing gaming in our town, we are directly contributing to the decline of that school funding and reducing the potential tax revenue for the state from gambling that could go directly into education. So like it or not, a vote for this is a vote against public school funding. This funding includes grants across the board, including special education and helping to keep state school tuition lower. How do we think that money is going to be made up? I would bet, pun intended, it will come at the expense of our tax-paying residents. I've also heard this need to support our local businesses and restaurants. And I would contend, as a community and as a village, we absolutely have. I feel much of this discussion around helping struggling restaurants held more water with me back in 2020. We all know it was a difficult time. But we asked the staff to provide us with revenue numbers from restaurants both in town and out of downtown, which is in our council questions. If you're interested, you can find them online. But based on the numbers the staff pulled and that were included in those questions, 2022 revenues for restaurants looked fantastic. Compared to 2019, restaurant revenue is up 23% across the village. 2021 was at or better than 2019 for downtown and not downtown, and revenues are up 20% year over year. And let's not forget how this village, including this council and the council before us, rallied behind our restaurants, in a number of meaningful ways. We voted to allow outdoor dining, picking up the cost of the rental of barriers that are still in place. We extended the outdoor dining timeline. We allowed the restaurants to provide liquor that could be picked up. We waived or delayed certain fees. Not to mention the work of the EDC, supported by this body, that is what they've done to ensure that grants were available and got in the hands of our restaurant owners. This was real, on-the-ground work that helped to keep restaurants open during some of our toughest times. I think the former EDC CEO stated at one point that we might have only lost 1 or 2 restaurants because of COVID. And I'm convinced that's in no small part from the help the village and our residents have already provided. Now, this idea of leveling the playing field with restaurants out of town rings extremely hollow to me. There have only been 4 municipalities since 2014 in DuPage County that have added gaming. So the idea that it is to make our restaurants more competitive is absent of any fact, because it's been 10 plus years with the same level of competition with bordering towns like Darien and Westmont and Oak Brook Terrace. Again, I refer you to the restaurant revenue numbers from the last 2 years. 20% increase. The idea that gaming allows restaurants to pay their staff more doesn't really seem to be the case. I did an analysis on server wages using Indeed.com, which is one of the largest recruiting and salary information sites. And this is what it shows. Wages for servers are not better in towns that have gaming. For gaming in DuPage, the wages for servers were an average of $15.68. For those in DuPage that do not have gaming, the average was $18.73. The same trend held true when we looked at our neighboring towns. $15.53 for those that have gaming, $18.70 for those that don't. I tend to like to go where the data leads me, and that tells me our restaurants with gaming simply do not pay their restaurants more. One council member remarked to me that gaming in town is an inevitability, but that could be no further from the truth. When you look at the data, towns adopting gaming have slowed dramatically since 2014. The vast majority of municipalities that allow this did so prior to 2015. In the last 4 years, the number of new municipalities offering gaming is less than 4% of the total that offer it. And when we look at the list that staff provided of the regional cities, only 1 has added it since 2015. This has plateaued. It's a saturated market. I feel it's a race towards the bottom, and the adoption rates are near 0. Now, I have avoided discussing the idea on the merits of this as it pertains to our community values and brand. I'm cognizant that this can invoke ideas of class or looking down our noses at something. But I don't see it that way. I happen to be a marketer by profession, and an organization's brand is not always created by that organization, but by the perception of your organization of others. But like it or not, all organizations, including towns and villages, have a brand. And we as a council and those before us have made decisions based on the values and the brand we seek to embody. The term brand appears multiple times in our comprehensive plans in an effort to demonstrate what we strive for. And it's not unprecedented to make value-based decisions. We banned sale of dogs and cats a few years before the state did. That is a value-based decision based on what we want to reflect as our town principles. Could we generate more revenue from selling cats and dogs? We sure can. But we made a decision to vote that down, or to actually prohibit that. We don't allow pawn shops in town. Another decision that I think reflects who we are. We have requirements on what paint colors and building materials can be used in certain districts. That's a brand. And during my research, I asked why, to serve alcohol, you have to serve food here in town. And it was expressed to me that the sentiment of this town is that we want to be seen as a restaurant town, not as a tavern town. No offense, Pierce Tavern, but you're a restaurant. Again, a branding decision. I have long called for more surveying in our village to understand what's important to our ever-changing community, to help create our brand and understand what our residents want. Which is why I think if some on these councils are not convinced that the community is against it, let's put it to a referendum. Something we've done plenty of times in the past to help inform our decision. I don't view that as a lack of leadership or decision-making. I view it as a tool to help a split council reflect the wants of a community. And there are some communities who've changed their mind. Forest Park reversed their decision to have it via a referendum. Joliet and Aurora, both casino towns, stopped issuing license for a period of time. And Mundelein raised their fees to curb more entries into the market. And speaking of changing minds, I just want to mention this idea of campaign promises. For those who talked about being in favor of it during the recent campaign, take it from someone who changed his view. During my run for this very seat, I met with a few restaurant owners reeling from the pandemic who made seemingly compelling claims about lost revenue, competitiveness, and revenue to the village. In the throes of COVID, the uncertainty of our economic conditions then, and my lack of facts around the matter, had me irresponsibly declaring support for gaming as a revenue source before I knew the facts. With clear eyes and time to research and understanding facts, which is what tabling the decision afforded me, it is obvious that I was short-sighted in my haste to say I would support it. I recommended to table then to better understand, and my conclusion is that it is not what our community wants. It adds no value to our village, and I simply cannot support it. And I believe the majority of our residents would much rather see us be a restaurant town than a casino town. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I didn't come prepared with a speech. I got a bunch of bullets because I thought we were going to talk more. So I apologize to my colleagues and maybe the audience if they were expecting a speech. I don't have one. I do have additional questions that I'd like to get out there. Some of them are about the ordinance itself. Some of them are about data that might help inform decisions. I fully admit I start from a position of feeling like this is a bad idea. Why do I feel like it's a bad idea? I don't care if you light a $100 bill on fire in your basement. That's your problem. But I do care that the community has a brand, as Chris talked about. And raise your hand, other than Bob and Brian, raise your hand if you would like to live next door to any of the places you've seen in DuPage County that are currently operating gaming. Yeah, okay, so the guy that sells terminals. All right, cool. But that is not going to be the response of most of the public. And so the question is why, right? Well, the question is because people worry about the impression and the image. And we've gone to great lengths to this ordinance, which is, as my colleagues have mentioned, I think pretty well done in terms of trying to come up with an ordinance that considers those. But it does a lot to try and prevent that very thing. It basically says, we feel like maybe we can find a way to do this as long as nobody really sees it. It's not really where anybody can tell what's going on. And I think that, frankly, to me, says a lot about it. If you want a game. It's for me, it's no, I've said this before, we've talked about this, I think we talked about it when Martin was mayor for a little bit. I've said this before, for me, it's no different than parking your RV in the yard. We make decisions about how we want to run our community every single day. Every time this group makes a decision, it infringes on rights of residents or businesses or both. Every single one. From funding an activity, the guy left, was excited about the funding, from funding an activity where we have to generate revenue. Every decision we make infringes on somebody's right to do what they want or their freedom to operate the way they want to operate. In this case, I don't think this is something that is that valuable to our community. Does it benefit a few people? Sure it does, obviously. But in the grand scheme of things, it's less than 0.5% of revenue. That's what the number is. That's the kind of money we're talking about for the village. So it isn't a cash grab. Martin was exactly right when he said it's not a cash grab. It's a request from some people who want to operate, and we get requests all the time. We get zoning requests, we get variance requests, we get requests from the EDC, we get all sorts of things, and we take some of them and we don't take some of them. For me, I don't have much interest in this, but I do want to learn some more because I want to try and verify some of the things that we've heard tonight. So I do have some questions, and if you guys, I'm not expecting answers tonight, obviously. One of the things that we've heard is, it talks about, we've heard, Chris did a little analysis of Indeed. We've heard people talk about how they would pay people more. There is, a Bureau of Labor Statistics, and there is an SIC class for eating and drinking establishments. I'd like us to at least try and understand that information. The communities and zip codes are pretty well known who does and doesn't have this. And I'd like to see if we have any data from the people whose job it is as a government entity to manage data, can answer that question. I don't know the answer, but I'd like to try and get it. I think it would be helpful. Property values is another thing. It's pretty subjective. When we heard about property value change in one town versus the other, that's the old sales thing, right? I can take you from $100 to $200 a lot faster than I can take you from $100,000 to $200,000. What would be interesting, we have this table of data which tells about when each of these communities chose to implement gaming. And what I think would also be good information for us is looking at residential and commercial EAV change over the period of time from when they implemented it to now. Again, it's just a piece of data, and like every other piece of data, you can twist it around, I suppose, but it's another piece of information. I like at least taking a run at getting some data better than I like anyone sitting up here or out there just saying their opinion of property values. We hear that on, again, half the decisions we make affect people's livelihood and their property values. As a frame of reference, Chris referenced some data we got in the last couple of days about income, or sales at least, not income, but certainly sales dollars of eating and drinking establishments in those same periods, whether you look at 18 versus 22, or you look at, I think Chris was mostly looking at 20 versus 22. Just for some perspective, if you try to compare to a couple of things, you compare it to either the inflation rate, CPI, or producer price index, they're either 2 or 3 times. So growth in sales at restaurants and eating establishments in Downers Grove, eating and drinking establishments, has gone up since 19 or 18, depending on when you want to look at it, at about twice the rate of inflation. Now, it doesn't convert to margin. I realize that, guys. I run businesses as well. But in terms of the idea that somehow there's a leaving behind of local eating and drinking establishments, that's not the case. Now, maybe it went up 3 times that in other communities where they have gaming. I don't know. But for perspective, they've done very well, and undoubtedly because of the support that the community has given them. We have this table, guys, that we got, and I'd be interested, we're talking about maybe as many as 60 machines. And so the table we have, I'm looking at table 5, I think it is. And I'd like to know if we could somehow note that which of those communities have cafes and which don't. Because there are some pretty big differences, even if you look at the people who are at or near 60 units. So I'd be curious to understand that better. Woodridge, Hanover Park, Lombard, and Darien in particular all have similar machine counts, and I don't know their status in terms of cafes or non-cafes. Back to, these are now kind of in the weeds a little bit on the ordinance itself. What was the driving force behind 10 licenses and 6 machines? Leslie made the comment 4 versus 6. My note says why 6 not 5, why 10 not 15. What if there was a particular, I know it's been referred to as a pilot program. Sometimes when we've talked about it in past conversations, I know we're looking at the idea of starting. If that mimics what how others have started, or other pilot programs, I'd love to know that, what the logic behind those numbers was. Annual fees look to me to be pretty aggressive. I guess I consider that a good thing since I'm sitting here right now generally opposed. But I would like to know if we have any concern about people taking all the licenses. I doubt it based on the revenue side, but they're materially higher than it looks like most of the ones we surveyed.
Sorry, man, what was the question?
Fees, your application fee and your license fee look high to me, which because I'm generally starting from a negative spot, I think is a good thing. But I'd like to know if we feel any risk associated with the licenses being taken.
How do they compare to other communities?
We have that.
No, I know that. I'm asking, right, and we set them at higher rates.
So the question is, do we think
Do we have any worry about risk of them being taken? Because of the revenue it seems like they're going to generate, I would say probably not, but if we look at Lombard, for instance, they have 10 licenses, 56 machines, they're only generating a total of $127,000. That means you have to work the math backwards to what each unit is getting, but it starts to be not that much money, so I'm curious about that. Application process and requirements, I think I understood that that's basically going to follow the lines of the liquor ordinance that we have. So one question I have is, do we anticipate any additional training requirements? We have some pretty enumerated specific training requirements for liquor license holders. Are there any that we anticipate or that the state requires related to gaming? You just plug it in and go?
Not that the village would enforce or that the village would require for the video
Okay.
gaming.
Might want
Regulated through the state.
Okay. Might want to see if there's any opportunities there. I think Martin started in on it a little bit, controlled by efforts, so my note says controlled by-ish efforts. We are adding some things that are pretty specific. Sight lines, wall heights, noise levels. The noise levels and the sight lines are the two that seem most likely to me to be difficult to enforce. How do we see ourselves doing that? Through a control by exercise, through community development, department inspections? I'd like to know how we see ourselves doing that. There's a role that the liquor commissioner plays that obviously isn't going to apply to video gaming licenses, but it kind of goes into the idea of distribution of the license. We talk about 10. It said first come, first serve. I read that, but that's a little bit like when, back to elections, all of a sudden 15 people show up for 4 spots. Do we anticipate a lottery? How do we see that actually going down?
In a first come, first served basis, the question is,
What happens when it's Monday morning at 7 and they're all
Yeah.
standing there, right? And there's 12 people standing there for 10 slots. I'd like to know what our plan for that is. And then we have, infrequently, but certainly on occasion, we have suspended liquor licenses for various activities. I assume, but I don't know if it's really for sure the fact, is that because you have to have a liquor license in effect to operate gaming, we suspend a liquor license for whatever reason. Does that have the effect of unplugging the machines? That's how we would do that? Okay. 3.607I, I'm wondering if we should have a lease requirement, specific lease requirement provision similar to liquor license, meaning we want to know that the landowner, the building owner, is aware of and approving of the activity of gaming. We have that requirement for liquor sales. Seems like we ought to have it for gaming too. I don't think it's probably a burden or an implement.
They would already have it. We would already have it because they would need a liquor license.
Right, but not for gaming.
They can't have a gaming license without a liquor license.
I understand that, but the owner of the building says, yes, I agree, our lease is going to include liquor sales.
You're asking for consent.
The operator comes in and says, I'd like my VG license also. I feel like we ought to have the landowner on that list.
So I'm sorry, I'm just trying to understand. Are you asking that the landowner consent to video gaming?
The landlord consent through a copy of the lease. We do that with liquor right now. I'd like the landlord to consent to the video gaming operations as well. Inspection procedures, I assume that's going to be just like liquor? We can inspect anytime we want and whoever we want? Yes? Okay. It didn't look as clear in there unless you went back and referred to the liquor ordinance, so I'd like them to know that the gaming itself is subject to the same kinds of inspections at any time by whomever we send. Required warning signs. So there are other examples where gaming licensing in some other states requires warning signs, sort of like so we have some signs that talk about drinking if you're pregnant kind of stuff. There's groups that do that. National Council on Problem Gaming, for instance, will provide materials for that. I'd like to see us consider that as an additional requirement. That if you're going to have this, you also have some warning signs, and then there's the state of Illinois that provides a service for people who have trouble. That should be available right there as well. It's not unlike what we do with liquor. Training. And then 116 in our regular ordinance is referred to through the liquor ordinance citation and settlement in lieu of prosecution. We would operate the same way with gaming. If there was a violation of the gaming operation, we would offer the opportunity for citation and settlement, just like we do with liquor. Is that true? Okay. All right, now I'm off the ordinance and on to some broader questions. I don't expect you to know the answer to this, but are there currently any state protections of the distributive fund that are unique and separate from others as they're subject to the annual LGDF dance that we have? That distributive fund, of course, the local government distributive fund in general, is a constant circus of nonsense. It struck me that this refers to a distributive fund method of distributing the revenues. I'd like to know if there's anything about that structure that thinks we would avoid the same kind of annual, not sure what's going to happen kind of event that we have with the LGDF. I think Leslie referred to talking about, whether changing that or working with DMMC. That's certainly a good idea. But I want to know the structure of that. Is it any different, or are we going to be subject to the same nonsense with that? And then revenue pledge, I have written down in my notes too. I'd like to, since this wasn't intended, some communities, Darien was one example, I think, who made comment that at one point they considered gaming because they were trying to fill a revenue hole. I think that's pretty common back in the time period when most of these folks got into this business. That's not our case, right? As Martin described, it's neither the reason, and as Chris described, nor is there much magnitude to it. But it seems like we do have some pretty known issues, and the one that's not going away anytime soon that burdens everybody for a long time is this pension question. And so I'd like us to consider pledging these revenues. I respect the advice that says that can be a little bit more restrictive than we want to do to ourselves. But if this is coming to us truly as just a way to help businesses, not a dire need of village revenues, I'd like to also restrict how they're spent. I don't want to create new programs that we then have to sustain irrespective of revenues. I'd also like to ask the EDC for an opinion. Martin talked a lot about economic development. I'd like to ask them for opinion. I don't know if they'll give us one. It's a little bit obviously of a third rail, as we saw from the Chamber. Chamber likes to be advocates. EDC may or may not want to be. But again, that's a group who we charge with understanding the world of economic development, the value of various things, whether they be, as the mayor said, as the former mayor said, incentive deals. I'd like to have their input on this. I think they should provide it to us. So I'd like officially to ask them for that, not just one of us calling them. No offense to anybody, but there's no obligation to keep this thing. If it's generating the kind of money for an individual operator, we probably shouldn't be talking about pulling it. I don't want to do it. I feel like, Maurice Slime and Blues Brothers, I have no interest in this. But at some point, if we go ahead and do this, we can't be talking about whether it's here or with our residents like this is some kind of a thing that we might stop doing sometime. People are building businesses. They're hiring people. They're taking out loans. And this is all part of the model that the performer they're going to submit and operate with. We shouldn't be pretending, I think it's pretending, that if we do this in 3 years, we're going to reconsider and maybe not do it. I just kind of think that's fooling ourselves. So it's just my 2 cents on that part of the conversation that occurred tonight. Fear of the unknown was thrown around a lot from the audience mostly. I don't think it's that, guys. I don't think this is some sort of, I'm afraid of additional police work, or I'm afraid of the people. That's not what I'm hearing. I'm hearing folks who don't like the image of it, and that's totally fair. I mean, that's no different than the lawn parking of an RV that I said, or the sign ordinance that we put in place in '07 or whenever it was to try and materially change the image of Ogden Avenue. We do that all the time, and we do it on purpose. We just got through doing a pretty extensive review of downtown design guidelines and a review process for that. We actually chose to suggest that people follow certain rules on how they make their building look, because it's part of our community. Now, maybe you think that's wrong. Fair enough, okay? But acting like we don't, as a group or as an entity, as a corporate entity of the village, concern ourselves with image and impression is just false. It's just not. It's not a fear thing. It's an intentional thing. It's an intentional decision to try and be a certain way, strive to change to a certain way. We spend money on landscaping. We spend money on curb cuts and signage. We spend all sorts of effort and resources to create certain impressions. When we do an economic development deal, as Martin talked about earlier, for instance, and you talked about it tonight with 63rd and Woodward. Bob, you're probably pretty aware of that facility. Every aspect of what we're going to do is going to require image changes to that property. We're going to enter into an agreement with those folks to hopefully do some redevelopment, and we're going to tie a lot of that to making the place look better. It's that simple, look better. Why would we do that? Because we care about the impression and the image of our community. So it's fair for people up here, or for people out there, or for people in our email to see gaming as not something they want to support. It's not a fear. It's just a frank decision. It's a decision by some people who have a different set of priorities or a different view. It's not class warfare. Honestly, when we talk about the cigar shops, that's not one of my favorites either. Anybody think those are great-looking facilities? Or is it on everybody's radar? Everybody's radar as a gateway spot with an opportunity that should be on our radar for future change. Yeah, it is. It absolutely is. It's not a criticism of the people that own it, or run it, or the people that patronize it. It's just a comment about what the community has said through their elected officials for decades as they do planning about what they hope their changes accomplish. That's it. There may be some more information that helps me, and I think it would help all of us to get some of that stuff, so I'd really like to. The conversation is nowhere near over. Two more things I want to touch on. I just kind of was scribbling notes as folks talked here. Eventualities and phones and things like that. Again, there's so many things that other communities do all across the country that we choose not to. The idea that you can do something on your phone, guys, come on, think about the stuff that you can do on your phone. And we're going to just say, well, because that's possible, because it's that common and available, it should be accessible and possible and available here. That makes zero sense. There may be a reason. The reason may be we simply want to provide the opportunity for some small businesses, 10 of them, to receive some additional revenue. That's fair. That's just like any other economic development deal we do. But for those that don't feel that way, don't act like it's some sort of a uneducated, biased, bigoted, whatever your role, your decision is, kind of a thing. It's simply a matter of people have opinions about what good impressions and bad impressions are. And there's people, we do that. Think about the village takes a role in enforcing house maintenance. We have trouble with the county helping us. But think about that. We have ordinances, and we actually play an active role in forcing people to maintain their property. Why would we do that? Because we care about the impression. One thing that I've heard people up here say, and we certainly got a lot of email on, and I think is a fair concern, is enforcement of whatever we do. And so I would like a little more descriptive ideas from our staff. I mean, I'm operating on the basis that obviously I'm probably not going to go for this, and it seems like the majority is. But some of these things that I think all of us share concerns on, whether it's liquor licenses or building codes, enforcement's a big deal, and I think we struggle historically on things like property maintenance. And so I don't know how that plays out. Danny made the comment that people put their flags up on the weekends because they think there's not as much enforcement. I think that's probably true, and so I'd like to hear, as we continue to talk about putting in a new opportunity for an activity that there is certainly a lot of pause about, how we would plan on ramping up enforcement. Whatever rules they are, whether they're building codes or liquor licenses or their hours of operation or food service or anything else, they ought to be, if we sit up here and decide on some rules, they ought to be heated. They ought to be heated. And I'm not sure we're real good at that. I know we try, and I know the county gets in our way, but I'd like to do that. And then the last thing I have to say is for my colleagues up here, at the risk of sounding like, I'm looking down my nose at somebody, there's a lot that we still need to, I would suggest we still need to improve. I'll pick on Ogden Avenue right now. But if you go back to that question, who wants to live next to it, take your pick. And I think we probably could do more and should consider doing more, particularly since we're into this subject, with signage and with aesthetic things. We prohibit some things right now. For those that don't know, we have some sign ordinances, like, for instance, how much of your window can be covered with signage. We have a number right now, it's 25 or 50 or something, but I think we ought to talk, not tonight, probably not the next time we talk about this, but a sign ordinance is on our list of things in the future, and I think we ought to remember some of these conversations and remember some of the concerns folks have here and see if there's ways to adjust that to further ameliorate, love that word, ameliorate these concerns. There's also concerns of lighting. We heard that tonight from one lady who talked about driving at the corner of 55th and Belmont, and it looks like a circus. So I suspect there's more we could do there as well. We have these various rules about things like 100 feet close to this or that, and we have certain setback requirements. That all has to do with where people live. And so if you are at or near any of these places residentially, I think we ought to be super concerned with that and hyper conservative with it. So I encourage all of us to think through some of that as we go forward as well. It's an evening of conversation, so we're not done unless we want to be done. Martin?
Just real quickly, first of all, Mayor, you're right, and you may recall there was a time that I was proposing we have a sunset provision on this, and I stayed away from that, but I do want to point out, or withdrawn that, but I do want to point out that there are things that we've done in the past that turned out not to be so good, and we did end them. Exhibit A, flag lots, if you remember those.
I do.
And there were a lot of people that had business models based around purchasing those lots, and it was a horrible idea, and we got rid of it. So there is some precedent for that. And the only other thing I just wanted to say is to everybody is I really appreciate, as I knew this would be a spirited and passionate conversation, and that's what government's like, right? But the only thing I would say is I'm sure there was no suggestion intended that not that any of us do not listen and receive and give due weight to communications we receive from residents, whether it's in the room or whether it's by email, and figuring out where people may live and getting emails from people who don't live in town, or people that clearly haven't read the ordinance, or reacting to a photograph that was posted. I think all of us have received that. I think we've all given it due consideration and weight, and I think we've all tried to do our best as representatives of the community and the positions we were elected to. I just wanted to point out, I don't think there was any suggestion that any of us have done that any less passionately than anyone else.
Danny, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally agree with Martin. I understand, kind of in the spirit of, Bob, what you said, how if there's a line out the door with some of these establishments, you don't want to be figuring out who gets it and who doesn't. And I understand that the majority of the council doesn't want to remove the restriction of 10. I would suggest, though, that at least in the spirit of the complying with the state's intent to allow clubs, regardless of the municipality's regulation, that maybe those establishments don't count towards the 10, given that what happens when we get 10 and the VFW now comes to us?
I guess that's a question I would have. Do they count towards the 10?
They do. They
Yeah.
currently do.
So what I'm suggesting is, okay, so it's 10 restaurants, and the clubs, what I'm suggesting, do not count towards the 10. If anybody else has any interest in that.
I'm the wrong guy to ask, right? I'll tell you, make it 5.
I think you're on.
But it's a good question. I mean,
I think
it's totally a reasonable question to be asking, and we probably need to make sure that we all understand that it's really 10 right now, is 10 minus those clubs, or that they would count towards it, so.
Yeah, it's 10 all day.
Yeah, right.
Could be tricky, though, as you're saying, if we've already given out 10, and
Well,
then...
Wouldn't the state compel us at that point?
That's what
They would not?
That's what I'm wondering.
Okay.
So we got a couple questions on the
Yeah.
table that would,
Okay.
once we get the answers to them, would help further this discussion. Once you understand how we are proposing to handle simultaneous filing, we could also answer, what happened,
Yeah.
what's the process when you get the 11th request, how does that work? So we can get you some information on that.
Good question, Danny, thank you. Others? Okay, that's enough for tonight. Dave?
Just a couple of things. We have a longstanding practice of answering every council member's questions and getting it back to the council. So we're definitely going to do that. But 2 questions related around that. One, we don't have a governance practice as it relates to requests of the EDC. So I'd appreciate just concurrence from the council that it's okay to forward that request that the mayor had vocalized to get the EDC's opinion on this project. So is the majority of the council okay with that request?
I don't disagree with the suggestion, Mayor, and I don't know how long it would take them to do it, because typically when we have asked the EDC to do things in the past, sometimes they may take a while because they're trying to be thorough and come back with the right answer, and then whether they reach consensus. Not that there's a huge rush here, but I would have a question as to how long that might take. And I don't know without asking them, so it might be a question of asking maybe Brian.
That would be part of the request. If the council directed the work, I would turn around and ask Brian.
Yeah, I mean, just from my own 2 cents, I would be, I think we always like the benefit of the EDC's opinions on things, but is that something that they're comfortable doing? And they may decide, well, that's not really in our ballot, I don't know. If so, then how long do they expect it would take?
So is there anybody in here that does not want to ask those questions of them? Anybody that doesn't want that input?
I'd say I want the input as long as it's timely.
Well,
Because
yeah,
I'm
I know
not
this is
I'm not
February
interested
and we're waiting for
in
a
dragging this
report.
out for 3 months.
Which leads to my next question. Clearly, on a council-initiated project like this came out of the priority action items, we want to move at the speed and the direction of the village council. Just wanted to get council feedback on the concept of another first reading at which we would present the answers to these questions. Just want to get the council's opinion on that. We're thinking another first reading or go straight to an active agenda. The first opportunity for an active agenda when all 7 council members are here is our special council meeting scheduled for 24th.
You could accomplish those answers, and we could be ready for an active on the 24th.
Yeah, because we have a meeting on the 17th.
Yeah.
So we'll plan
the
for,
first reading on the
in our
17th?
planning right now would be an active on the 24th.
Yes.
So I want to make sure I understand what's being proposed. We're talking about having more discussion about this at our next meeting.
On the 17th.
But maintaining second reading at the 24th.
Assuming all goes well.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll ask again on the
It's just a-
17th.
The assumption to operate under right now from a staff direction standpoint would be that, yes.
Thank you.
We will ask again after the 17th discussion where the council would like to go next, and we'll have the benefit of not only the staff responses, but EDC responses to those questions.
Okay. All right, anything else? Okay.
That ends our first reading
Sounds like
and the
we're done.
manager's report today, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Does this mean we have to deal with an attorney's report?
Yes, Mayor. I only have 3 items tonight. The first is an ordinance rezoning property at 1634 63rd Street, an ordinance rezoning property at 3854 Glendenning, and an ordinance establishing video game regulations. That is all. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I do not have anything to add to the conversation tonight, so we'll go on to council member reports. For those that are sticking around, this is when council members report out on goings-on in the community, other groups they're connected to, and we're kind of having everybody fade here, and or if they want to make the community aware of certain events. So we'll start. Mike, you have anything?
Just, I look forward to hopefully having some time at a future meeting to report out a little bit on my attendance at the IML conference a little over a week ago on a Friday, and I suspect Councilperson Leslie Sladowski would like to do that as well. So, so hopefully we'll get to do that. We took some pretty good notes, and then wanted to share that our Downers Grove North cross-country team, both boys and gals, were recently ranked #1 in the state, and that's the first time that's happened anywhere for any school. So pretty great, and they've got a big meet coming up tomorrow, the Twilight Invite at Naperville North tomorrow Eve, and the group from South will be there as well, so best of luck to our North and South cross-country teams. Thank you.
Thank you. Danny?
No report, thank you, Mayor.
Leslie?
So honestly, I was still going to do the Illinois Municipal League thing, 'cause I don't think any of our meetings are getting any shorter.
Yeah.
If everybody is done for,
Yeah,
I will
let's-
pass it along.
We'll have a shorter one.
Well, we need visual aids.
Martin, what do you have?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mayor. No, I just want to add a new business item. I think that in future, we need to have proclamations with two sides, because if we're going to have more people like Bruce Swanson honored and recognized, you need to have more than one page to work with. That's it.
Chris?
Yeah, I didn't get a chance earlier when Dave was going through the projects, but I just want to say thanks for the additional work on the social services gap analysis. That was something that I had was involved in before my time here on the council, and what a treat it is to see how much has been completed. And I also love the format of this and getting these updates, but that one was particularly great to hear. So great work, and looking forward to more good from that. So thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all, and good night.